Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Nicholas locked himself in his room. It was very hard on his soul, but no one had ever told him that his life would be trouble-free and easy. He took off his glasses and wiped away his tears. How much hard labor. And had stolen goods ever brought anyone happiness, he said aloud when mankind realized that this is not the way to do things. A month ago, a 62-year-old scientist was left on the street. He was not kicked out of the office, of course, but his invention, to which he had devoted almost 25 years, was unceremoniously appropriated by the superintendent. What did I want? Wasn't that the way it used to be? Who among true scientists could boast that his labor was appreciated? Smith, perhaps. The pain was tearing his heart, somewhere inside. Nicholas himself realized that his invention was priceless, and it was very easy to take it away on some pretext, but he wasn't connected to the police or any other authorities. Okay, that could be explained somehow. After they confiscated his car and all the documents, a week later, rumors began to spread that, say, the superintendent began to draw up documents for the patent of the very installation, which so many years collected Nicholas. He had never been an entrepreneur or businessman. He was driven by pure altruism, faith in people, a desire for a better future. But very quickly he realized that not everyone lives like that most people live only for today. They don't care about their children and the next generation. A month later, the head of the once promising laboratory walked around very proud, and it was already openly said that he filed for a patent on Swan's machine. Nicholas couldn't take it anymore and quit immediately. "Daddy," his daughter knocked on his door. "Are you all right?" she asked excitedly. "Yes, everything is fine," he tried to speak, so that his voice did not tremble. The daughter sighed, returned to the kitchen. No one like her knew how much her father cared about what he was doing. The girl had been born with some problems. She had a slight developmental delay. One leg was weaker. Of course, this did not affect her mental abilities in any way, but she never managed to make friends, let alone get married. She worked part-time writing articles for online publications. She had a third job group, but Emily didn't go to the office. She wouldn't have been hired elsewhere. The girl didn't move that fast. Her father dreamed that he would receive money for the patent, and they would finally make repairs in the apartment. And now there would be no pension supplement. In fact, he was promised to raise it for his contribution to science. But now these finances will also be presented to the salary of the 55-year-old superintendent. Emily was worried sick about her father. He was the only person close to her. She was pretty good at science, too. Nicholas often sat next to his daughter and reasoned. So from childhood, the girl got used to thinking rationally and logically. Unfortunately, at the age of 12, her mother died. Nicholas was so absorbed in science that he did not even think of getting married a second time. "We should eat something," Nicholas whispered. He had gotten very thin over the month. Finally, he left his room, which served as his study. He headed for the kitchen, from which pleasant smells were wafting. "Papa," Emily came up to him. "Let's have tea. The apple pie is almost cold."
"It smells delicious," he smiled. "I need something to do or I'm going to go crazy."
"Daddy, you've worked so many years. Just rest," she begged him. "But they promised to give me more work. If I were a photographer, of course I'd get a lot more." "What are you writing about now?" Father asked. "Is it about the forest again?" "No, I have a few articles about deserts now," she smiled. "You know, I could make a lot more money if I wrote about cosmetics and stupid relationships. But I can't," she sighed. "It's not real." "I understand. Dad said, when I first said that Einstein was a genius, but he was wrong not to go ahead. I almost got blown to smithereens. Of course, there were always those who disliked him. but I always admired him. Even now that I've been able to put his theoretical laws into practice, he was always there for me. None of the physicists helped me as much as he did, even though he and I had never met in person. But it was like I could feel what he was saying and what he was doubting. So take the road that you feel is yours. But don't think about money. Don't compare being paid less for your woods than a story of betrayal. Dad, do you have to go on too? Seriously replied the daughter. Any topic can be looked at from different angles. So look at yours from the one from which you have yet seen it. So Nicholas realized that Emily was right. How many times he wanted to grab his old notebook again, sit down to calculate. But it was either fear or resentment that kept him from doing so. The man could be called an intellectual in the true sense. He never wished harm to anyone. The only goal of his life was to create a better future for the next generation. That's what he lived for. And now it's all been destroyed. What would happen to his installation? He didn't know. So perhaps it would have gone on like this for the rest of his life. But there was an unpleasant event that shook him up. Doctor, I will do everything in my power. Nicholas looked at the doctor. Please help her. She has a long treatment ahead of her. I can tell you one thing. Prepare a lot of money. But it won't go away on its own for sure, the doctor answered him. Nicholas sat beside his daughter, squeezed her hand tightly and cried.
Dad, come on, Anastasia said with pale lips. Everything will be all right. I'm going to be all right.
Of course you will, he stroked Emily's head. My girl, I'm so sorry I didn't spend more time with you. That day, Nicholas's heart ached constantly. He couldn't lose his daughter. Something inside overpowered. So he grabbed his notebook, started writing something, then drawing. Long formulas, calculations came again. Look on the bright side, he mumbled. Which side? I don't understand. He tossed the notebook aside and clutched his head. God, what do you want me to do? I've done everything I can. I invented this machine that was supposed to revolutionize quantum mechanics. And what? It's just taken away. Was it my fault? Nicholas realized what huge prospects would have opened up, not only for physics, but also, for example, for the computer industry. After all, his machine made it clear that computing could be accelerated by a factor of 20,000. This could turn the Earth into a paradise in an instant. How many people could be saved by performing hitherto impossible operations, exploring the deep layers of the Earth and preventing earthquakes? Nicholas' head was exploding because what he had invented was completely changing the future. Sure, it was all in the bud, but it was a foundation on which to build a happy life. Right now, I only have one person to save, my daughter, he said dryly. I'm not interested in the rest. Nicholas went online and looked up the prices of the drugs he needed to buy for Emily. Oh my God, he paled. One ampoule was 180,000. It was a real blow. Now his daughter needed 5 shots, then 2 more for 2 months straight, then alternate, and so on for a whole year. Nicholas realized he needed to get back to reality. To hell with science. He needed to find some kind of job. Emily could die. He reached into the classifeeds, swiftly driving his eyes around. His brain was boiling, so he couldn't concentrate. God, I can't do anything but science, he cried. Maybe I could become a tutor. But Nicholas didn't understand the school program at all. Besides, he'd never taught. He was a performer, not a teacher. Almost 3 days passed like hell for him. He collected all the money, sold some old furniture and valuable books for 3 ampoules. That was enough money, but he needed at least 2 more. Nicholas clenched his hands into fists and went to a very unpleasant meeting. He looked at the former superintendent in horror. So how are you resting in retirement? Not bad. Do you sleep well at night? They stole my invention, filed a patent on it. Nicholas had nothing to lose. I need the money. My daughter is seriously ill. At least give me half of it. Get out of here, swore at the superintendent, otherwise I'll make sure you go to jail. You're the one who stole my designs. It's good that I realized it in time. And scoundrel. Nicholas clung to him. My daughter could die. You're an idiot. You're stupid. You don't know anything about science. Finally, the guest managed to tear away from the head. He was scared out of his wits. As you know, all scoundrels are actually very cowardly. Nicholas returned home angry. He now didn't know exactly where he would get the money from. On his way home, he bought a newspaper. There were a couple of ads. From despair, the man began to read them. "A watchman is needed at the cemetery," he sighed, "from 2 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon." Nicholas thought about it. He had to start somewhere anyway. It didn't scare him at all that it was a cemetery. "To hell with you. I'll guard the dead," he shouted to someone. "Choke on it, you bastard," he swore at the former manager. "Stolen goods won't do you any good anyway." Nicholas agreed that from tonight he would start work, but that was not the most important thing. The man urgently needed to borrow money for 2 more apples. After all, a few acquaintances had already transferred some of it to him, as much as they could, so Emily at least would survive. Nicholas opened the bag. He threw some books in it, 2 notebooks, a notebook, then put his daughter's groceries in another bag and went to the hospital. And from there, immediately he planned to drive to work. Because it was very difficult to find a cemetery watchman, the pay was not bad. They were offering $18,000 for 15 nights. And that was a lot of money for Nicholas's budget right now. The director of the cemetery told him everything, showed him cameras were installed all over the cemetery. So if anything happened, he could call the police right away. "Basically, it's quiet here," the director grinned. "Every now and then some sectarians gather to perform their rituals. There have only been a couple of grave robberies, but otherwise it's been uneventful." Nicholas set up his workstation. Most importantly, he had a desk. He opened a book, started reading something. Then, one by one, notes began to appear in his notebook. When Nicholas finished writing, he did not remember. The man opened his eyes. His head was lying on the book. "Where am I?" He was afraid. It had already dawned outside. "Oh, that's right. I'm at the cemetery. In 2 hours, the janitor would be here." Nicholas didn't even look at what was in his notebook. He stuffed everything in his bag and went outside. "God, how fleeting our lives are," he sighed. "Can't people live for 70 years? Honestly, surely some of them had stolen, killed, raped." And he looked around. The cemetery seemed endless. How many of those who lay here had lived by the law? Is it possible to take anything to the afterlife? Then why not be a good man? After all, the earth equalizes everyone. Nicholas philosophized for a while. To his surprise, the cemetery didn't scare him. "We need to find some work for the day," he said aloud. "It won't be enough." And with these thoughts, he returned home. He ate a quick breakfast and started to look at the advertisements. No, a janitor won't do. You have to work there early in the morning. He looked at the job offers. Dog walking. Jesus, there's even that. Why get a dog if you can't take care of it? He scratched his head. Nicholas couldn't find anything suitable, and he felt cold again. "Let the bastard kill me," he shouted. And then he'd go to jail. At least he'd have some redemption for his theft. This one headed for the lab again. This time he threatened to sue. The supervisor got him out of there somehow. "This is the last time I'm warning you. If you come back again, you're dead," the director threatened him. "We'll see about that. I won't leave you alone," Nicholas threatened him with his fist. In fact, the headmaster did not expect such a boldness from his employee, and neither did he. But his daughter's life was at stake, so for that he could risk it. Nicholas went into Emily's room. She was looking better. Her father had specifically asked the doctor not to tell her about the expensive medication. "I got a job," he smiled. "Daughter, I promise you, everything will be all right." "Dad, I'm terrified," she looked at her father. "But this is a cemetery. Aren't you scared?" "No, they're dead," he laughed. Why be afraid of them? You should be afraid of the living. They're the ones who can do harm. He sighed, remembering the head of the laboratory. The doctor told the man that Emily would be discharged in a week. The crisis had passed. She now needed constant treatment. In addition to the medicine he had already gotten, there were many more pills needed. Okay, I'll get them all, he promised. Nicholas realized that in his position it was difficult, harder than he thought. Of course, Emily would continue to work, but her pension and the money she was earning would barely be enough for food. But for medical treatment, almost a week went by like that. Nicholas started working part-time at the market as a loader. The money was paid right away, so after the cemetery, he went straight there. He didn't get much sleep because he was doing science again at night. That's what he was all about. That's what motivated his life. Emily was adamantly against it, but her father hinted to her that she was serious. Am I going to die? The girl was terrified. Dad, don't be silent. Tell me the truth. No, but you need treatment, Emily. We need a lot of money for that, answered the father. Emily realized that she would no longer be able to get a job at the store or any other place related to traffic. She decided to take every article that was offered to her. But even that didn't save her. As a copywriter, she wasn't getting paid much. And so Nicholas made up his mind. He filed a police report about the theft of his invention. It was a cold fall morning when he went to the market. The clock read about 8 o'clock. Suddenly someone approached the man from behind and held something to his back. Don't move, the man's voice wheezed. This is your last warning. If you don't take your statement from the police, I'll kill you and your daughter. The bastard sent you. Nicholas wanted to turn around sharply, but something tore his cloak and stabbed him in the back. And you will close this case tonight. Do you understand me? The man felt himself being pushed, and he flew into the grass. Books spilled out of the bag. Nicholas only saw someone turn the corner. Who was it? He didn't know. He quickly gathered his things, but as he fell, his cell phone fell out of his coat pocket and flew aside. And Nicholas didn't see it coming. With curses, he headed for the market. He had work to do. Why isn't he answering? Emily worried. Maybe he's gotten sick. Little things, he works at the cemetery after all. As she didn't wait any longer, she got dressed, called a cab, and in about 40 minutes she entered the gate of the cemetery and headed towards the gatehouse. The janitor and the janitor in one person usually sat there during the day. Good afternoon, she opened the door, but there was no one inside. Where are you? Or was it hard to walk far? Emily asked. There were some funeral services in the cemetery. The girl decided to look in there too, and it was empty. Hey, is anyone here? She shouted. The shout echoed and Emily shuddered. She was about to leave when some rustling sound came from the far corner. The girl's heart raced, but she made her way there. There was a coffin lying unnoticed at the very end, because there were some things hanging in front of it and other coffins standing in front of it. Emily could obviously hear a noise coming from it. She herself didn't know how, but she managed to open the lid. It was strange. Coffins didn't usually have locks. In the coffin was a bound man, a gag in his mouth. Emily shrieked and bounced away. The man was twitching his body and wanted to say something to her, but there were voices, and she closed the lid again. Excuse me, she approached the salesman. How much does one of these cost? Her voice trembled. Emily's whole body was shaking. What are you doing here? The owner asked her. There were 2 other men standing around him. The woman fixed her eyes on them. I came in. There was no one here. I wanted to choose, she stammered, dizzy. But what are you doing here? I'm going to call the police, the owner threatened. When I'm not here, you have to wait outside. I'm sorry, but I didn't know where you were, Emily excused herself. I'm sorry again, she said and ran outside. Emily didn't know what to do. Her father was missing. She had apparently learned someone else's terrible secret. She called a cab, went to the market, and found her father. He told her he'd lost his cell phone somewhere. Nicholas didn't want Emily to know he was being threatened. "Dad, I need to tell you something," she cried. "Come home soon." Nicholas was getting worried. Emily shouldn't be nervous at all right now. An hour later, he finished and went back to where he'd fallen. But the phone was gone. "Dad," her daughter cried, "I'm so worried that you didn't answer. I went to the cemetery in there." "What happened there?" He hugged her. "Did someone hurt you there?" "Well, tell me." "Dad, I went to the funeral parlor, and there was a live person in a coffin," she finally said. "How so?" Nicholas turned pale. "Emily, are you sure?" He scratched his head. Yes, the coffin was locked. The man's hands and feet were bound and he couldn't break free. He couldn't scream either. His mouth was gagged with something. She sobbed. "Dad, what's going on in there? Are they burying living people?" "I don't know," Nicholas shrugged. "Let's see if the owner of the service doesn't know anything. Well, maybe this coffin was planted on him." It was 5:30. Nicholas was leaving for work at 7. They had dinner. "Dad, take me with you," begged his daughter. "I'm afraid for you. Maybe there are some gangsters out there." "So everything will be all right," he smiled, though he wasn't sure of it. He pulled out his cell phone. He didn't care about smartphones right now. That evening, Nicholas didn't take anything with him, only cookies for tea. He had a bad feeling about it. The funeral service agency did various jobs. It was organized by one family. It was safe to say it was their empire. They were making $1 million on death. Nicholas headed over there. The owner was bustling with customers. He had a few words with the guard. "Okay, have a good night. I'll go to work." He smiled and headed for his gatehouse. The man saw the owner come out with the visitors and went to some grave. Nicholas quickly ducked into the hall, immediately finding the coffin Emily had told him about. But everything was quiet there. He was about to leave the room when some people entered and headed that way. Nicholas was terrified. He managed to hide behind the coffin. "He's sleeping now," he said. "During the night, he will be given medicine to stop his heart. Could you bury him tomorrow at lunchtime? Please make sure it's done properly. We don't have much time," said a woman's voice. "If necessary, I'll pay you." Nicholas froze. He had to summon all his willpower to move. A man's murder was being plotted, and from what he'd observed, the owner of this unremarkable establishment was providing such services. He tried to stand up, finally succeeding, but suddenly the lights went out everywhere. Then someone closed the door. "No," Nicholas thought, "I'll have to sleep here now." He fumbled in his pockets and came to an even greater fury. Distractedness was his problem. He left his cell phone on the table. "Shit, what the hell is a stretch?" he lamented. "Life never taught me anything." Nicholas didn't notice how he fell asleep. He had good dreams, so he didn't think about waking up. Andrew got a call from the master to the assistant. "Are you drinking again? I told you to finish your business first." "Did he?" "Yes, I'm completely sober," the man replied with a slurred tongue. Naturally, the director, the owner of the ritual services, would never set himself up. So he had one debtor for dirty work. In the afternoon, he injected sleeping pills into someone who'd been ordered by a rich woman. True, Eddie didn't know that Andrew had overdone it and injected a double dose. But the main thing is that the one in the coffin is asleep, and the rest doesn't matter. "Been quickly cab and finished the job," ordered the owner. "I left everything on the table in the back room. Call me as soon as you're done." "Yeah, you'll probably get noticed. The watchman will say you're here to see me, and he should have been warned that we get nighttime visitors from time to fit in." "You got it." The ex-paratrooper put his hand to his temple. "Eddie, you can count on me." Andrew hummed something. He'd almost drained the bottle. The case guaranteed him some money and a whole case of vodka. The chief had promised, and he always kept his promises. After this, I'll go on a bender for a week, Andrew dreamed. That would be fun. When he got dressed, the cab was already waiting for him on the street. On the way, Andrew even managed to fall asleep. Someone woke him up the driver near the cemetery. "Why are you here?" He looked at Andrew in horror. "Are you going to the other world?" "I think there's a guard here." "Bro, it's all right," patted him on the shoulder Andrew. "It's my mother's birthday today. The guard promised to take me to her. I've been working all day, I didn't have time." "Well-known workers," laughed the man. "All right, come on. Don't let the ghosts scare you here." "Yes, I'll ram them into a ram's horn." Andrew raised one hand. "Let them try." The cab driver left, and Andrew knew where he had to go. He carefully took a couple of iron bars and walked into the territory of the cemetery. The gatehouse. No lights were on, which meant the watchman was asleep. All the better. Andrew carefully opened the door, quietly turned on the light, since there was not a single window in the room. "Well, shall we begin?" Andrew sang loudly. His voice echoed off the coffins. Nicholas opened his eyes abruptly. He immediately remembered what had happened to him. In fact, he wanted to jump out of the building, but something was telling him not to leave the man who lay in the coffin. In the dark, Nicholas was afraid to open the coffin lest he have a heart attack. Andrew was singing merrily. He went into the back room. There on the table lay everything he needed. He quickly drew some substance from a vial into a syringe and headed for the place. Nicholas watched as he opened the coffin. There was some man lying there. "Well, hero, welcome to the other world," he laughed. Andrew swung, but someone in the air intercepted his arm. "Don't you dare," Nicholas shouted. "What are you doing? Leave him alone." "Hey, who are you?" Andrew recoiled in horror. "Andrew, what are you doing here?" One of his hands closed the coffin with a swing. Nicholas had never fought in his life, unless as a child, but at that moment some kind of power swept over him. "Well, I'll show you," the ex-paratrooper roared, something he still remembered. He swung the syringe in his hand. Nicholas felt the pain. Andrew began to press down on the plunger. Some amount of poison entered his bloodstream. The scientist grabbed something and hit the agent on the head with all his might. The man immediately fell unconscious. Nicholas pulled out the syringe and tossed it aside. It landed neatly in some sort of rag box. Nicholas immediately tied Andrew's hands and feet together. He saw that there was some sort of recess behind the coffins, and some rolls of material were stored there. The man threw the bandit there. In an instant, Nicholas felt sick and dizzy. He grabbed the rolls and pulled them behind him, fell, and several tens of kilograms of matter came down on him. In general, both Andrew and himself were buried under a pile of fabric. "God, what a nice day." Riley stretched. "I guess this must be the Golden Fall." The man got off his desk chair and looked out the window. He didn't feel like working. It wasn't often he could afford it. But that day his soul really sang. "Let's go somewhere." He called his wife. "I'd love to go for a walk." "I can't right now." Her voice sounded strange. "I'm sorry, but I have an important meeting." "It's all right," he sighed. "I'll see you tonight." He said goodbye to his wife. The man went back to work. He had a big company and business was going well. 3 years ago, he bought his wife a beauty parlor. Carla ran it, but he was the official owner. They'd agreed that once things got going, Riley would sign the salon over to her. Truth be told, compared to the man's business, the salon was something completely insignificant. But it wasn't as simple as it seemed at first glance. Still, Riley left the office early that day. He walked through the park and thought about how his life had turned out. He wished he could say he was happy. Big money, good living conditions, a beautiful wife. What else could he dream of? To his horror, the man found that he wanted to give up everything and know the joy of simple things. How often he had dreamed of him and Carla riding bikes together on weekends, shopping and generally spending time together. But she was always busy. Her husband often even joked about it. "Carla, I have almost 200 people working in my company. and you have 5. And you work harder than I do. But it's not my fault that I'm so responsible, she joked. I need everything to be perfect. So often it seems like if I had this or that, then I wouldn't have any trouble. But Riley knew from experience that money doesn't solve problems. After all, the latter is somehow born in our heads. People with money don't stop getting sick, much less dying. So their whole life revolves around the same problems as an ordinary person. You could say that nothing changes, although money can spoil a person. Well, Riley had observed this more than once. Of course, he was afraid of losing his company too, but his fears didn't go to extremes. I want children, the man whispered. How long can we wait? He thought about the most painful topic. Carla was adamantly reluctant to give birth. When Riley had tried to talk to her about it, she said she had a right to. Not every woman should become a mother. Of course, her husband didn't force her to, although a child can only come from love. I thought maybe there was something wrong with their feelings. Digging into herself wasn't working. Although Riley decided for himself that he needed to think about what he really wanted, so the man bought a bouquet of flowers and headed home. He liked paying attention to Carla. He kissed her. I'm so glad you're home. Let's have a candlelight dinner. I can't do that. She grabbed her purse. I've been waiting to see you. There was scandal at the salon today, but a client made a scene. We need to go down there and get to the bottom of it. Do you need help? Her husband asked her right away. Carla, I can come with you. She thanked but declined. Riley sighed and put the flowers in the vase. Something's going wrong, he whispered. It feels like some kind of storm is coming. With that not-so-good feeling, he went to his room. He didn't want to think about anything, so Riley turned on some movie. He fell asleep that day. He didn't hear his wife come home. Sometimes they slept in separate rooms. It wasn't unusual. Carla wasn't in the parlor at the time. Or rather, she stopped by to check that the missus was there. Then she got on the highway and headed for a village. There, just before she reached it, there was a cottage village. That's where Carla's car turned. The car entered a covered yard. The gate closed immediately. There were no dackets nearby, so no one saw any lights. A handsome man hugged her. How I missed you. And he began to kiss his guest passionately. To everyone who had ever seen Andrew, he was Carla's cousin. And even Riley had met him a few times. The man was also aware that his sister had helped buy him a house in the summer houses. So from the outside, there was nothing contradictory in the whole story. Met lovers almost 5 years ago. The romance broke out lightning fast and burned all these years with an even flame. Carla was sure that she loved Andrew. At its core, it was nothing new. Andrew had come to town for the good life, and he didn't care what the cost was to get it. He danced at a strip club. The handsome, pumped-up young man drove many women crazy. But Andrew knew his own price. He was not interested in inexperienced girls with their problems. He immediately tuned in to an independent woman. The age difference was not that great. Carla had recently turned 33, when Andrew was 25 at the time of their first meeting. Many people don't quite understand the mindset of a rich man. Many people are exactly why they want to have a lot of money, so they can try everything that is out of reach for the average person. It's like a game. Rich wives play too. They get bored with having everything. And since money has always been an end in itself for them, it has defined their lives. It was the penniless scientist Nicholas who was trying for all mankind, but people like his superintendent Carla and her lover didn't care. Their thinking was so narrow that it revolved only around themselves. Lately, Riley had begun to wonder about that too. He even thought of starting a charitable foundation, but his wife had talked him out of it. Andrew grabbed his guest in his arms and carried her into the bedroom. He had a fancy house. Andrew made a very good living stripping, but as they say, appetite comes at mealtime. It seemed to the guy that he deserved more. That's how one plan came into his head. Things were going so well with Carla, so it was possible to take a risk for riches. The young man was willing to take some risks. An hour later, the lovers were discussing their business. 3 years ago, they had approved their plan. It was so dangerous that every step had to be calculated. Carla didn't register the beauty parlor so that she wouldn't be suspected later. In fact, she was trying to be very careful. She and Riley went on vacations from time to time, went to restaurants. So from the outside, you could say they were a normal couple. And then came a very exciting time. The lovers were preparing the final stage of their plan. But before Riley could be taken out, everything had to be in place. "What about the doctor?" Andrew asked Carla. "He's definitely reliable. Should we offer him more money?" "He's fine," she smiled. "Andrew, how much more?" "He'll just have to testify that Riley died of cardiac arrest. It's not like he's going to kill him." It was all so easy in Carla's mind. The woman didn't quite realize that no matter how much you paid, if it came to your own safety, the man would turn everyone in. How many times have crooks and con artists like this made the same mistakes? And the outcome is always the same. Those whom they once paid for the sake of their freedom told everything, even what really did not happen. If a man is willing to do something against another man, why can't he do something against you? After all, it's that simple. But unfortunately, some wealthy people who consider themselves the greats of this world are somehow sure that it does not apply to them, to let it happen to others, but it won't affect them. That's how Carla was sure that the truth was on her side, that she could pay someone money and sleep well. Good, Andrew was satisfied with her answer. "What about the funeral home? Have you talked to them yet?" "No. Tomorrow I have a meeting with one. He keeps the North Cemetery," answered Andrew's mistress. "As soon as I agree with him, we'll visit him together." Before 9 o'clock, Carla had discussed everything she wanted. Now she could go home in high spirits, for the day when she would be happy was drawing near. Why couldn't she divorce Riley and take her half? A difficult question. The woman was sure she was worth far more than some handouts. Besides, she'd spent so many years working for her husband. He was obligated to compensate her for that. Many people think that women, because of their lack of physical strength, can't be violent. But that's just an illusion. Some representatives of the weaker sex can be so vindictive and insidious that you can just be horrified at how easily they are crucified with the unwanted. Suffice it to remember the queens and empresses, cruel was enough in any country. The ability to give life does not automatically confer humanity. So Carla could safely be called an insensitive person. She returned home, looked in on her husband. He was asleep. Carla turned off the TV and went to her room. She kept going over her plan in her head. Soon everything was going to be hers. In 6 months she would sell everything and go abroad, where Andrew would come to join her. Carla already had some business leads there. In her mind, she and her new husband would own a small company. This will be enough for them to have a cloudless family life. Perhaps Carla would decide to have children as well. She hadn't thought about that yet. Why did the woman want to go abroad? Because there was always the risk that something would come to light. Criminals always flee the scene of a crime. Abroad, she would feel completely safe. With such happy thoughts, she fell asleep that night. And in the morning, a new day awaited her. In some very serious business. Carla pretended to be asleep when Riley walked in that morning. He didn't wake her up. He went to work. After breakfast, Carla headed to the funeral parlor up north. She'd been told by someone that they could arrange some not-so-legal business there. So Carla expected to get the information she needed today. The woman in high heels entered the not-so-pleasant room. She got the shivers. "Good afternoon." She addressed the man. "I need your master." "I'm listening to you," Eddie answered her. "What are you interested in? We have various options." "I'd like to talk to you privately." She hinted at a private conversation. Eddie took her into the back room. It was where he often handled such matters. There's a man we need to bury, but not quite dead, Carla hinted. Do you want us to bring him to the right state? The owner smiled at once. Yes, we owe you the doctor, and you owe us the morgue and everything else, she said. Well, it's a question of price. The man kept his eyes on her. It's too risky, as far as I'm concerned. You don't come from a poor family. Who wants to go to the other side eagerly? My husband, she whispered. He's a horribly vile and disgusting man. So you see, there's no other way to deal with him. I see, Eddie said knowingly. You'll need a separate fee for the morgue. All right, just take it one step at a time. He has to die the night before his funeral. I don't know about that, Carla asked. Then bring him to me tonight. We'll calm him down, put him to bed, and then make it look like his heart stopped. That's not a bad plan, she smiled, named the amount. I need to see how much my beloved husband's life will cost me. Eddie wasn't going to be shy. Carla's eyes widened in surprise. She'd expected less. You have to understand, too. I'm putting myself in jeopardy. The owner didn't want to undercut the price. It's a deal. Carla held out her hand to him. Then I'll call you when we're ready to bring him in. The scheme was very simple. A doctor comes to Riley's house, admits he's dead. They give him a sedative and take him to Eddie. He gets a certificate from the morgue. It's like the autopsy was done. That's it. Then on the day of the funeral, the coffin is taken straight to the cemetery, where people will begin to say goodbye to the deceased. Carla wanted to send her husband to the crematorium at first, but something inside her stopped her. Still, the coffin will be closed, because after Riley's heart stops, Eddie emphasized, he will also hemorrhage at the same time. Just like that, Riley's fate was sealed. No one knew how the adventure would actually end. Just before the finale, Carla was very affectionate with her husband so as not to arouse any suspicion. For several days in a row, they had romantic evenings. Riley was beginning to hope that his married life was about to change. But 2 more days passed, and it was time for the execution. Carla announced to her husband that they were going to have something special tonight. She set the table. Riley came home from work and almost lost his mind. Carla was waiting for him in a beautiful, sexy dress. Well, you get prettier and prettier every time, her husband complimented her. Carla, I'm crazy about you. They had a little snack. The woman put on some relaxing music and poured wine. To us, she handed her husband his glass. He drank it immediately and put his arm around her waist. Do you want to dance? She laughed. They twirled slowly in their dance as Riley suddenly became dizzy and fell to the floor. The sleeping pills Carla had slipped her husband had taken effect. An hour later, the right doctor arrived and wrote a death certificate, preliminarily ruling cardiac arrest. Riley was loaded into the car and driven toward the cemetery, where Eddie was waiting for him. And he made sure that the man was asleep. His man tied his hands and feet and put a gag in his mouth. After that, they put him in a special coffin. The day after tomorrow at lunchtime you'll pick him up, the funeral home owner said. I'll stop by tomorrow to make sure everything is okay, Carla said. And the man agreed. Eddie called an acquaintance at the morgue to have the dead soul examined. The autopsy would confirm cardiac arrest. Sometimes that's what happens, especially since Riley had been complaining to his wife about heart pain lately. But he never made it to the doctor. So the customer left. She headed over to Andrew's place. He wasn't sleeping either. They celebrated the end of their case quite well. I'll pick you up tomorrow at lunchtime, Carla told him goodbye. She had to make sure he did everything right. She didn't trust anyone, especially not in a case like this. And since she was a responsible person, she had to see to it herself. Riley came to his senses and found, to his horror, that he was lying in the middle of nowhere. It was dark. His hands and feet were bound. He couldn't scream either. The man tried banging his head and legs to make sure someone could hear him. Suddenly, the coffin opened. Some girl was sitting in front of it. Riley hoped she would save him, but the lid closed quickly and he was trapped again. So he started knocking again. Soon enough, someone spoke. The lid opened. There was a man standing in front of Riley, staggering from side to side. "Why are you making so much noise?" Andrew said unhappily. "Be patient, soon you will go to the other world. It won't be long now." So Riley wanted to jump out of the coffin, but he felt something stabbed into his shoulder, and 5 minutes later, he fell into a deep sleep. "That's it. That's enough." Andrew rubbed his hands together. That was kicking like a bull. "Why so worried? I don't understand." Andrew threw the syringe into the special waste. This garbage was never checked. The owner has already met with some important people. Baba, in Andrew's opinion, was behaving rather defiantly. Eddie opened the coffin and made sure Riley was asleep. Now it was just a matter of time. "If you don't drink tonight," he ordered his assistant. "You see, he'll get his last medicine at night." He put his hand to his temple. "Andrew, you know me." What a bastard. Eddie was angry because Andrew never called him. It was early morning. Drunk again, he thought. At 8 o'clock, Eddie pulled up to the cemetery. He looked into the coffin. Riley lay there pale. He didn't look at him. He closed the coffin lid firmly, looked around, but Andrew was nowhere to be found. That meant he'd gone on a bender. Eddie waved goodbye. "As long as he gets the job done," he said, and went about his business. It wasn't the first time a man had been complicit in such an event. That's why he wasn't particularly worried. The previous times, everything had gone smoothly. So everything should be fine this time, too. Eddie calmly went about his business. He had to be free by lunchtime when they came for the coffin. The thoughts of the amount of money he'd made on Riley warmed his soul. Still, I had the best job in the world. He stretched contentedly and squeezed his eyes shut with joy. I wouldn't trade it for anything else. Eddie looked contentedly around at the coffins and other trappings of such an important ritual. People were willing to pay for death. So why not take that money? "Jesus, where's he again?" Emily worried. Her father didn't answer again. The daughter calmed down, then dialed his number again. Finally, at 10, she couldn't stand it and went to the cemetery. But Nicholas wasn't there. She called a cab again and went to the market. She found her father's landlord. "I don't know," he shrugged. "He didn't come today. I called him too, but he didn't answer." Emily was exhausted, but she went back to the cemetery. The man who worked there during the day was digging a grave for the deceased, who was to be buried today. Yes, he forgot his phone. The man held out the phone to her. "I don't know. Earlier than me, he left today." Emily figured her father would be home by now. She made her way to the gate. With her leg like that, it was hard to move fast. She got into the elevator. She was sure father was waiting for her at home, but it was empty. "Daddy," she cried. God, what had happened to him? Emily's nerves gave way. The girl called a cab for the umpteenth time today, drove to the cemetery again. It was almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and she saw people gathered nearby. Out of inertia, Emily headed there, looking for her father with her eyes. She didn't pay attention to what was going on. Just then, a scream was heard. Emily noticed a woman in a black veil screaming loudly. A coffin was lifted up and began to be lowered into the grave. Everything blurred before Emily's eyes. From somewhere in her chest, an inhuman scream burst out. "Stop!" She shouted across the cemetery. "There's a living person in there." Everyone turned on her without exception. "Open up." Emily pulled out her cell phone with lightning speed. "I'm going to call the police." "Who is this crazy woman?" "The woman in black. Get her out of here right now." "Police," Emily yelled into the phone. "They're burying a man alive in here." The widow fainted. Someone rushed to her. Men pulled the coffin out of the grave. People started demanding to open the lid. They opened it, and oh God, in the coffin lay a man with his hands and feet bound and a gag sticking out of his mouth. He's alive. Someone felt for a pulse. He's breathing. Get an ambulance. Call an ambulance. They tried to kill him, Emily screamed, keeping her eyes on the widow. You did it. She lashed out at Carla. Andrew quickly grabbed her arm and headed for the cemetery exit. People didn't know what to do. What's going on out there? Eddie looked out at the screens. He saw Carla running toward the gate with the man. The funeral director went pale, rushed to the grave. Riley was lying on the ground there. His arms and legs had already been freed, but he was sound asleep. One thing was certain, the man was alive. Eddie took his own pulse. It was faint, but it was audible. Bastard, he scolded to himself. Where is that thing? He headed indoors to call Andrew. Oh, Nicholas touched his head. Mom, what happened to me? He crawled out from under the rolls. Someone downstairs was wheezing. The man dug out a drunken Andrew. Your piece of work, he threw him to the floor. Damn you to hell. He swore and staggered toward the exit. What are you doing here? Eddie's jaw dropped when he saw the guard. He waved his hand. Nicholas needed a breath of fresh air, but as soon as he stepped outside, he was out of it. All around the cemetery, people were running around like ants. What's going on? Nicholas grabbed his head. Maybe I'm going crazy. Sirens could be heard. Almost simultaneously, the police and ambulance arrived. Nicholas saw someone being carried away on a stretcher. The man sat down on the ground because he was very dizzy. Daddy! Emily ran up to him. Daddy, where have you been? Nicholas' eyes swam again, and he lost consciousness. He woke up at home. There was a wet towel on his head. He groaned. Emily came to him. It's okay, she petted him. Dad, I was so worried. The doctor said you were poisoned. They found a small amount of poison in your blood. Not me, Force, but the guy in the coffin. They tried to save him, but that asshole injected me. Emily sat there all pale. If it hadn't been for her father, the man in the coffin would have died. They told each other everything that had happened to them. Both of them were amazed by these events. The next day, Nicholas felt better and called the police officer to give a statement. They have already confessed, the policeman said. Thank you for your help. If it wasn't for you, he would have been killed for sure. After a week, father and daughter calmed down a bit. Nicholas gave up guarding the cemetery. He went back to his formulae. Mother of God, he jumped up. I was wrong. He clutched his head. Why did I put the odds at 1 and 3 instead of 1 and 5? That means he thought for a moment. It means that in the long run, my rig will fail. It just won't work. This discovery saddened him on the one hand and pleased him on the other. After all, he was going to do some serious testing on his machine before he applied for a patent. And that meant Nicholas Hello in the evening called him a former colleague from the laboratory. Can you believe it? Swan's been assassinated. I'm sorry, but I heard they found a defect in your car, said the former colleague. I know, Nicholas laughed merrily, and I'm the only one who knows why. So he couldn't fool me. That's how it is. Sometimes we think that there was a real tragedy, and then some events happen, and it becomes clear that it was the best thing that could have happened. Nicholas walked into his daughter's room. She was typing something at the computer. Emily, God is on our side, he hugged her. You have no idea how happy I am. Now, Nicholas could put together a new rig that would actually work. I'll try to find a sponsor, he sighed. Maybe someone will be interested in my invention and engine. Someone rang the doorbell. The owners were alarmed. They thought it was the police. They came from time to time to verify Riley's statement. Hello, Nicholas turned pale. It's you. He stared at the visitor's face. I'm glad he could finally get out to see you. I'm sorry I didn't thank you sooner. Come in. He opened the door wider. Do we have guests? Who's there? The girl ran out into the corridor and froze like a stumbling block. Unlike her father, she remembered that face very well. The tea eased the tension, and the acquaintances were able to start a conversation. Nicholas was the first to speak. The policeman said they confessed to everything. His voice trembled. It seems to me that no human being could have conceived such a thing. Only the devil. They're all going to jail. They're in the detention center now, Riley replied. And thanks to both of you, I've been resurrected. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. Riley, wouldn't you do the same? Nicholas stared into his eyes. Why do people make heroes out of ordinary people to make themselves look good? May I thank you in some way, insisted the guest. I sincerely want it. Well, all right, came to Nicholas a thought. I don't need it for myself. If you agree to do something for people. I agree, he answered without listening. I don't care how. But I want to thank life for what it has done for me. 2 years passed. Nicholas, hello. Someone entered the laboratory. How are you doing? Oh, Riley. It's good to see you, my father-in-law smiled. He was dirty. There were 2 other people hustling around. Thanks for the helpers. Good guys. Nicholas, the guest said formally. Will you let us go on vacation for a week? You don't want to go on vacation with us? I certainly don't. I'm about to launch. You can go, he said with a wave of his hand. Just keep an eye on Emily. I'm looking forward to my grandson. Who am I going to pass on all my knowledge to? Him, of course. I could not, and he will definitely become a luminary of science. And you did, Riley replied seriously. What you've done for us and our children is priceless, and we will always remember you.
John, the head of Comtech, a new computer technology and development company, was driving home after a day's work. Things weren't going well at his firm. There had been crises in the work before. The rise was replaced by a fall, but it had never been so bad. So his thoughts were on one thing. Why was his company losing money? Why the previously prosperous company began to lose orders? So many complaints about their products had never been. What happened? These thoughts did not give him peace. Everyone has problems in life. Some solve them easily, and some run away from them, thinking that everything will work itself out. That's exactly what Veronica thought, running away from her common-law husband. Having hastily packed a suitcase of her and her children's things, she went, as they call it, wherever she looked. Mommy, a cool light shouted little Tom. Come on, Green. He pulled her by the hand. Veronica reached the middle of the road and felt that she was falling. Her legs shook, her eyes darkened, but she did not let go of the child's hand. So as she fell, she pulled him with her. John's gaze lingered on her as she began to cross the road. She was tall, too thin for her height, and he didn't like that kind of woman. She was pulling the huge suitcase like a truck and wouldn't let go of the child's small hand. He could barely keep up with the woman's wide strides. While John watched her, the woman had collapsed onto the pavement and was now lying in the middle of the road with the baby crying and screaming for mommy. John was confused for a moment, then jumped out onto the road and picked up the woman and carried her into the passenger compartment of the car. Picked up the suitcase, the baby, and took her to his house. In such situations, one had to think fast, so he called a doctor friend and asked him to come to him urgently. What's your name, baby? Tom. I'm Uncle John. You know your mom's name? Yeah, Veronica. Veronica. Yes. You can't spell. Yes, I can, but my mom says I'll learn. Sure you will. I couldn't say R either, and then I learned. Uncle John, what about my mom? I don't know, kid. The doctor's gonna take a look at her and tell us. Jack, an internist of the highest caliber, arrived almost at the same time as the owner of the house. John carried Veronica into the house and put her on the couch. After washing his hands, the doctor began to examine the woman and lifting her dress. He saw huge bruises on the inner thighs. There were bruises on her neck and arms, and it was clear that the woman had been abused. "John, I think she's been raped. I'll need to see her at the clinic and get her tested." "What's taking her so long to wake up?" She's just having trouble opening her eyes." "Veronica, can you walk?" I was having a hard time with her words. "You didn't answer my question." She tried to get up from the couch, but as soon as her feet hit the hard floor and her body straightened, her head started to spin again, and the doctor put her back down. Dr. Jack managed to get Veronica into his car. She resisted. She wanted to take the baby with her, but John was able to convince her that Tom would be fine. Her eyes were filled with fear. She knew it was wrong, but her strength was failing her. Back at the house, John's attention was drawn to Veronica's bag. Opening it, he saw a passport. Veronica, 27 years old. She was 35 now, but she didn't look so good. Little Tom was quiet and sat on the couch where his mom had just been lying. "Come on, baby. Let's get something to eat. What do you like?" "I like everything. Mommy's a good cook." "How old are you?" He saw the year of birth in the passport, but there must be something to talk about. "I'm this old," and he showed me all the fingers on his right hand. "That's right, you'll be 5 soon, man," John said with a smile. "Do you like mashed potatoes?" "Yes, that's good. I have an aunt who knows how to cook very well. Look what cutlets and mashed potatoes." The child looked into the deep frying pan and said, "It smells good." The boy ate very carefully and even knew how to use a knife, which surprised the man. "Who taught you how to use a knife?" "My dad. His name is Jacob." "I see. So you're Tom?" "No, I'm Tom." John had never dealt with such small children. He had never had any of his own, though he had always dreamed of a large and close-knit family. But it didn't work out. Ignoring the advice of his parents about the chosen girl for the role of spouse, he got married at the age of 22, had to rent an apartment, a lot of work and moonlighting. But even this money, his Veronica, was not enough. Endlessly pouting lips, bad moods, and telling him off like a boy. It became so familiar and habitual that John stopped paying attention to it. If you're married, you're obliged to provide for your wife. I'm not saying no, but why shouldn't a wife help her husband? Go to work and supplement the family budget. Yes, Veronica wondered, that's not why I got married. And what for, I'm curious to know. To live at my own pleasure, not to work for pennies from morning till night. That was the last straw. I'll give you that opportunity. He packed up his things and left the keys to his rented apartment and left for good. She followed him for another 6 months and asked him to come back, but it took him 2 years to realize that his parents were right. He saw her again when he opened his company and became not rich, but the money appeared. Nick's nose was right. "John, let's try it again. Let's start over." Try, but not with me." Veronica was in the clinic for a week. Jack gave her a cell phone so she could see her Tom every night. He played in a room with lots of toys, was cheerful, and most importantly, healthy. "Thank you so much, John. I'll never pay you back." "Oh, come on. I'm glad I could help. And you got a great kid. He's trying to save the hours, so maybe by the time you leave the clinic, he'll be a surprise." She was crying and couldn't say a word. They put the baby in daycare. John would drop him off in the morning, and Lana, a good, kind woman who lived next door to her daughter's family, would pick him up. Although Veronica saw her son every day, all sorts of thoughts came into her head. She had to restrain herself from these thoughts. She needed strength to recover, so she had to think about good things. John's appearance in her life had shifted her idea of people in her brain, because living in her husband's house, she had lost her faith in kindness. The clock was already midnight. It was the last night in the clinic. She could not sleep. There were so many emotions inside. It was necessary to solve many problems. With housing, with work, with kindergarten, there are many questions. There are no answers to any of them, but she will try to do everything for the sake of her son. All the same, sleep took her in its tender embrace, and only in the morning, a young nurse woke her up to give her the last injection. Meeting Veronica from the hospital was John and his son. It seemed to her that Tom had grown and gotten better. "Mom, I missed you." "I missed you too, son." "Mommy, Uncle John taught me how to say fish, cancer, frame, radio." John smiled. He liked that boy. "Thanks, John, for everything. Glad I could help. John, please take us to the hotel and I'll start looking for an apartment tomorrow. I'll pick up your stuff later, okay? How about this? You'll look for an apartment in my house. I don't want to drag the kid around to hotels. Then he has to go to kindergarten tomorrow. His teachers praise him. He's already found a girlfriend there. Son, don't make any decisions without your mom. Uncle John says a man should be independent and reliable. Oh, you guys are getting serious. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, let's go home. The table was set. Tom was getting the hang of it. He knew his way around. He felt at home. Lunch turned into dinner and my son fell asleep in Veronica's arms. She put him to bed and returned to the table. Is everything all right? John asked, looking into the woman's eyes. Everything is just fine, Veronica replied, running her palm through his hair, then over his face, bringing a smile to John's face. He's learned to play gadgets and he can spell the letter R now. He really wanted to be home in time for you to come home from the clinic. This is really a surprise to me. Thank you. How did you get him into daycare? I know it's not easy. Lana's daughter, who picked him up from daycare, is the supervisor. It's simple. There was silence for a moment. Veronica spoke first. You probably want to know what happened to me. She looked at John, of course. You must know who you let into the house. But I don't think we can do it in one evening. You'll have to stay at my place with my son. Well, if you're not too bored with us. Not at all. I was born and raised in the country. You may have noticed that I'm tall. That's great. Probably only in the village they called me Kolomenskaya Versta, or fireman's messenger, whoever liked it. I didn't pay much attention, but I was a little offended. Boys were shy to approach me because they were all shorter than me. My parents were simple people. My dad worked on a tractor. My mom was a milkmaid. She worked from morning till night, so my grandmother brought me up. She was the only one who knew what they called me at school. I'll never get married like that, Grandma. Who needs such a pole? Don't be in a hurry. At the right time, the right man will find you. I believed my grandmother, and when I met Jacob, Tom's father, I thought my grandmother's words were prophetic. He did find me. After high school, I went to the county seat and went to college to become a model designer. I've always been an excellent draftsman. Skinny, long, but as I grew up, I gained meat, rounded out, and in college, they started calling me a model. What have you forgotten in this college, said the girls in the group. With your height and figure should go to modeling. So after graduating from college, I went to New York. Casting passed and began to work as a model. It was hard work, I was tired, but they loved me in the sense that it was easy to sew on me. It was at one of these shows that Jacob saw me, and it was a siege. He was 10 years older than me, handsome, dressed expensively, but I was afraid of him. He looked like a bandit. No, not the knife-wielding kind, but the kind of gangster they call a businessman now. He had a fiery temper, and it was better not to get under his hot hand. And I'd been hit more than once. That's why I was afraid of him. He never suggested marriage, but he provided for me. And when Tom was born, he was glad. I thought that was happiness. I just never got to see the real happiness. I tried to leave several times, but immediately I remembered hard times, debts, lack of money. My friend kept whispering in my ear, "You're a fool, Veronica. Everyone envies you. Such a man paid attention, wanted a child from you, and you? Remember, my dear, that figure, breast, and everything that you have on your face is temporary. And this temporary comes so quickly that it becomes scary, and you are in the group of divorcees rushing. Take into account, you are a special divorcee with an extra, such not every man will pull and in general will want to pull, who meets someone else's kid and not put off leaving every time. But this time was the last straw. Did he rape you?" John asked a question and regretted it at once because Veronica shrank, her hands shook, and the answer to the man was silence, oppressive, sepulchral, pressing like a tombstone. "Did he rape you?" John asked the question and regretted it immediately because Veronica clenched, her hands shook, and the man's answer was silence, oppressive, sepulchral, pressing like a tombstone. The eyes of a frightened woman looked up at him. She clasped her trembling fingers around the hot mug, from which there was a pleasant tea aroma, and taking in more air, wanted to answer his question, but she didn't. "Whatever you tell me now, I won't run away with my heels clicking. I'll help you if I can. You're safe here. This is my home, and only the person I want here can enter it. I apologize for the situation on the road, and she's blushing. Come on, no one is immune to asshole violence. Only the last asshole would raise his hand to a woman. I always thought that, besides hands sure of strength, a man should have a heart. That a man should take the initiative. We've completely forgotten the age of romance. Now it is not fashionable to invite on a date, to the movies on the last row, treat ice cream. You go straight to, she looked at John, and he did not avert his gaze. Many of her statements he agreed with. He watched her nervously walk around the table, sipping sips of her long, cool tea. She was indeed a tall girl. If he was 6 feet tall, she was about 10 centimeters shorter. Very thin, but it didn't affect her face. She had the right shape. Her eyebrows may be a little thicker than today's fashionistas wear, but those freckles could drive any man crazy. Blue eyes. Her nose was a little upturned, like Tom's, and her lips were her own, without silicone. Her hair was in a ponytail now, but when he carried her into the house, after she'd fallen, it had spread out on the pillow. It was long and heavy, but she was a dyed blonde. Not a beauty, but very pleasant and far from shallow. When he woke up from his thoughts, she was silent. It was obvious she was gathering her thoughts. Jacob went to the season opening at the fashion house. There were a lot of people, all dressed up in beautiful outfits, the men in strict suits with bow ties. Champagne was flowing, music was playing loudly, laughter was heard from everywhere. For some reason, I was not worried. Probably I did not understand the degree of responsibility that the fashion designers and the management of the fashion house had put on us. The show was excellent, which I did not doubt. We were all given a bonus, and I remember I used it to buy warm boots. At the second show, I noticed a man sitting on the front row. He caught my eye because he was wearing dark glasses. His hair to hair and lightly unshaven. I noted to myself that he was an interesting man, but when this interesting man met me at the exit and offered to get into his car, which looked more like a tank, I refused, or rather, I was afraid. He did not ask me, but ordered me straight away. Get in the car, I won't hurt you. The phrase sounded ambiguous with a hint, say, and the money will be only after. I guess he preferred this format of relations. He forgot about romance or didn't know. There was no place for it in his life. Usually there were no misfires, so this time he hoped to make an effect. But the beauty did not fall for the usual tricks of the young man. I'm not interested in your proposal. I do not get into the car with strange men and do not poke me. We did not drink on a broad rift. The stranger's eyebrows went up. The refusal clearly hurt the man, but he was not going to give up. He's not a boy to pout his lips and take offense. Did not agree this time, will agree in another. But the girl was firmly planted in his head. And Veronica, taking advantage of his confusion, quickly disappeared in the car girlfriend, who took her home. From that day on, the siege of the fortress began. As Veronica saw Jacob again at a fashion show, he went to the fashion house with persistent constancy. Endless thoughts about the girl turned the grown man into a horny teenager. And one day, when she came out after work, he stood with a large bouquet and introduced himself as Jacob. Veronica said then, embarrassed, "I know," said the man. "I know all about you. Can I take you to a restaurant for dinner?" I was really hungry, so I went with him. He brought me home very late and invited me to the restaurant again the next day. No, Jacob, no offense. I'm a bit of a fan of these places. If you want to see me, let's just walk around. He agreed, and we walked around New York City all evening so I could finally admire her beauty. That's how we began to see him often, and in 6 months he invited me to his house. Of course, I understood why he called me there and how it could end, but I thought that he was my happiness. He found me, as my grandmother said. After living in his house for a month, I began to feel a terrible pressure from his side. "Veronica, you won't be working at the fashion house anymore. I don't want ugly men looking at my woman. Stay at home, take care of yourself. Swimming pool, fitness, beauty salon, wherever else you go. Add more from idleness." He flashed such a look that inside everything turned cold. "I don't want to sit at home and be a burden on your neck. I like my job, and that's not the deal. You're not my husband, and I'm not your wife." He left for work, slamming the door so hard I was surprised it didn't come off its hinges. It took me 15 minutes to pack my things, and I left again to my apartment, which fortunately did not have time to refuse. In the evening, I had work to do, and Jacob sat frowning in his seat with the bouquet. I didn't look at him and went home through the back exit. He rang the doorbell of my rental apartment for a long time, which I never opened. Luckily, it was the end of the season at the fashion house and everyone was on vacation. I'd rented another apartment, giving up my old one, which was very comfortable and cozy, but otherwise Jacob wouldn't let me rest. I even changed my SIM card. I decided to get out of Jacob's life completely. I managed to do it for exactly 3 weeks. He had everyone on edge, and one day I saw him with a bouquet when I came out of the driveway. "I'm sorry," he rushed up to me. "I'm an idiot, a jealous idiot. You're so beautiful and everyone's staring at you. I'm going crazy." "Jacob, this is why we shouldn't be together anymore. I'm not quitting my job, and I'm not going to fight with you about it. Let's just be friends." "No, I don't want to be friends. I want you to move back into my house." "Do you hear yourself? I am. I demand, I'm going crazy. But where are my desires? They don't exist and can't exist if you're around, Mr. Jacob." I got away this time, but he wouldn't give up. There was no point in changing apartments. He'd find one anyway, so I decided to leave the house less. I saw his car parked in the driveway every morning. "Diane, what do I do? Jacob won't let me leave. Come to my house. He's parked in the driveway every day, and I can't get out. It's not like he stays out there all night. When he leaves, call a cab and come to my place." So I did, and for another week I was fine. But as soon as I got to work, he took his seat in the front row. "Oh, Veronica, there's your handsome boy again. He's your destiny after all. You can't abuse a man like that." "I'm sorry." "That's right, he loves you." After work, Jacob was waiting for me again, so I didn't run away from him. "Okay, Jacob, I'll go with you. But let's make a deal. I'm working. No dictating, no pressure." "I agree," he said, and I moved back in with him. After I moved in, I got pregnant quickly, even though I was on birth control. I didn't need a baby yet. I had nothing of my own. I lived in Jacob's house. I wasn't a wife, so I didn't have any rights, and then I had a baby. I went to my doctor, showed her the pills, and told her that they didn't help prevent pregnancy, but the opposite. "They're the best on the market right now. They're the most reliable. Maybe you've been forgetting to take them. Then it really can happen." I was about to leave when she opened the box. "Veronica, what did you bring me?" "These aren't the pills I prescribed for you." "What do you mean, the wrong ones?" I was surprised. "They're the ones I bought at the pharmacy." "Yes, the box is the same and they look very similar, but you can't fool me. Who had access to those pills?" "Where did you keep them?" "In my bedroom, in my bedside table. I think they're pacifiers. Vitamins at best. Leave them with me. I'll get them to the lab." That's how I found out Jacob switched my pills with regular vitamins. I had to apologize to the doctor. I didn't know how to tell him, but I didn't want to look stupid, so one night I did. "Jacob, I can't believe you had to be so treacherous to get me to commit to you. You were thinking of yourself again, and I trusted your manly word. Do you realize what a terrible thing you've done? I can't trust you now. Tomorrow you'll be sick of me and you'll poison me." Fortunately, he did not start to gawk with surprise and refuse, and immediately said that I am very stroppy and tame me can only a child. So ended an episode in my life called The Taming of the Shrew. I was saved by my height and thinness. I worked practically until I gave birth, under Jacob's evil stares. Tom was born, my sweet son, my joy and pride. Everything had changed in the house except one thing. I was still not Jacob's wife. It was all right with him. He loved his son and did everything for him. Now he was happy. I was at home with the baby, never going out. He brought everything. Groceries, things, diapers, everything. I only went out for a walk with Tom, and then around the house under the supervision of the guards. Then I realized what a golden cage was and how I wanted to escape from it. But the child held me back. When Tom turned 3, I started talking about work. "Jacob, I want to get a job." "Where you want to put the baby?" "We'll get a nanny. We won't be the first. We won't be the last." "No," he said shortly. He didn't explain anything. But I insisted, and that's when we had our first big fight. You keep me in this cage. I can't even meet my friends. What kind of captivity is this? And that's when he hit me for the first time. He smashed my lip. My nose was bleeding. You wanted to see your friends? Go on. I'm not keeping you. So I went out all night. Probably to the casino or to the girls. I didn't care. All night I lay with ice on my face, but there was a huge hematoma on my cheek. I got a call from work. Veronica, are we expecting you? How are you? Are you coming back? How long can you wait? Well, considering your previous achievements, 6 months, others wouldn't wait a month. You know how many people are interested. But there aren't many girls with your height and figure. Okay, thank you very much. I'll try my best. It was well past midnight. I'm tired, John. I'll see you tomorrow. Do you have security here? They won't let anyone in here. Don't worry, there's security. I'll tell them not to let anyone in. I'm not expecting anyone, and neither are you. Okay, I'll feel better that way. She fell asleep next to her son, calmly and without dreams. When Veronica woke up, the house was empty. Oh my God, I overslept. It's a shame. A stranger taking care of my child. She went down to the kitchen. There at the stove stood a pleasant woman in a beautiful apron and cooked. The aromas were appetizing and even enticing. Her stomach rumbled immediately and the woman turned around. It seemed to Veronica that her body reacted very loudly to the mind-blowing odors. Good morning. You're so fragrant, it's impossible to remain indifferent. Your son gives me the same compliments. He does. He'll be a ladies' man. I think he'll be a fine man. Thank you. Sit down to breakfast. Lunch won't be for another 3 hours. John said he'd be here for dinner, which means 6 o'clock. After breakfast, she went to look around the house. The first floor was occupied by a large living room, kitchen, John's study, utility rooms, and 2 servants' quarters. And on the second floor was the master bedroom, 2 guest rooms, a shower, a bathtub, a toilet, a small exercise room, and a small room hastily furnished for Tom as a playroom. Veronica's heart squeezed with gratitude to the man. I'm lucky, Veronica thought. Even though I hit my head pretty hard, I met John. She went into his office. She quietly opened the door and poked her head in and looked around. There was a nice desk, a big chair next to it, a lot of books and flowers. The violets were all in bloom. It was gorgeous. So they like it here. She remembered her grandmother's words. A flower will never bloom if it is not happy with that person. On the coffee table, she saw pictures. John was looking at her from one. Brunette, no more than 35 years old. Small curls cut very short and barely visible. Dark chocolate eyes, sensual lips. He looked like he was looking into the soul. It was obvious that he didn't come to be photographed on purpose, and the lens caught him by chance. His shirt was carelessly unbuttoned a little more than was customary for men. She noted that he was an interesting man, but even that wasn't the main thing. He was kind and decent. The other pictures were of his parents and friends. She stayed a little longer in his abode and went to lie down, her strength not yet fully returned to her. She woke up to someone shaking her by the arm. When she opened her eyes, she saw Tom's son. Who brought you here? Lana. She's nice. He laid down next to his mother. I missed you so much. Didn't you have a bad time with Uncle John? He's interesting, but I missed you. My darling boy, I've been dying to see you too. But the doctors wouldn't let me go until the treatment was over. It was just the 2 of them at dinner. John didn't show up as promised. They didn't wait for him and fell asleep. John had a lot of problems at the company. His security service did not sit idle and checked all the streams where the information goes from whom and, most importantly, to whom. Tomorrow, John allowed all the employees to leave from lunch under the pretext of sanitizing the cafe on the floor below. He and his guys stayed the night to set up the security cameras. For the surveillance cameras, John supervised all the work. The security guys were great. Not jocks, bouncers, just smart. They took a few people at a time and came to John a week later with the results. It was all on a flash drive. John was furious. The person he trusted the most was working for the man who was ruining his reputation. All right, Mickey was feeding him information, and Tony, why is he off the hook, is our biggest customer. So this Christian guy fights with Tony, letting him know we're so cheap, working on two fronts. Who's Christian? Never heard of him. He's an ex-gangster, used to dealing in the 90s, thinks he can do it now. Find out more about him. All right, I'll have it on your desk in a couple days. Keep the cameras on a permanent basis. I'll only trust them after I've checked. I want Mickey in my office first thing tomorrow morning. Look the bastard in the eye. See what he's been missing. He arrived home in the morning, quietly showered and went straight to bed. But he woke up at 7 o'clock, as usual. Tom came into his room. "Come in," John told him. The boy climbed up on his bed. "Are we going to kindergarten today? Do you want to?" "I don't want to go a little bit. I want to be with my mom." "Then it's settled. You have today off, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. That's how long you can be with your mom." "Thank you, Uncle John." He took his face in his little hands and kissed him on the cheek. John felt it. It felt incredible. He had never felt like this before. Everything was turning over inside him. The contact with his palms let something warm and important into his heart. At some moment, he even wanted to press him to his chest, to feel this childish sincerity and to see his smile without two teeth. "I'm getting old." Hissing a child brings a tear to my eye. How imperceptibly old age crept up, the man thought with a smile. He remembered his serious conversation with Mickey, grumbled, and quickly left for work. Tom was so happy to be with his mom all day long. How good it was talking to you, boy, not leaving Veronica's side. "And I'm very well with you, my darling." After breakfast, they read, then played, walked, and after lunch, the child fell asleep like a dead man. And Veronica decided to call Diana. "Hi, friend," she said cheerfully. "When are you going to work?" Soon. "How's it going?" Same old, same old." "How are you and your handsome boy?" "What's new?" She was always asking the same questions. She believed that the main thing in a girl's life is to find the right man who will provide from head to toe and solve all problems. She was not very successful, but Diana did not lose hope, and after each failure again threw herself into the battle. She went to the most expensive restaurants, to prestigious exhibitions, where you can often see wealthy men young and not so young. Veronica was used to relying only on herself. She left her parents early and realized that there was no one to help her but herself. She studied, worked part-time, solved her problems as best she could, including material ones, and never relied on anyone, especially not on a man. She did not rush into a relationship, as in the maelstrom, and cautiously looked at those who tried to hit on her. More often, she ignored all the signs of attention, waiting for the one and only one that her grandmother said, "Veronica, are you all right?" She was wary of such a question. "Yeah," she stretched out. "Why do you ask?" "So yours came running with bulging eyes, wanted to see you, went to the bosses, had heartbreaking conversations with me, screaming his wife and child are missing SOS. And what did he want? I wanted to know where you were. Where are you really? Maybe I'll come to your place and we'll talk. It doesn't matter where I am. Don't you trust me?" "Diane, it's okay. No offense. Bye. I'll call you later." After that conversation, she felt uneasy and regretted calling her friend. What did she say? Jacob asked Diane, who had been standing next to her the whole conversation. Diane was about to dial her number when Veronica called her. She didn't say anything. She said it's the right thing to do. You must have hurt her badly if she ran away from you and took her son with her. Don't worry. Diana took up to calm the man. Diana, such handsome men do not leave her, she purred, buttoning up her shirt. Let's go somewhere distracting. Your Veronica's coming. She's not going anywhere. She came so close to him that she could smell his perfume. She leaned her cheek against his unshaven one and cried out, "You're as prickly as a hedgehog. Shall we go out tonight? Let's do it next time." And after dropping the $5,000, walked out of the fashion house. She liked Jacob when he first come to their show, but for some reason, he was attracted to Veronica. What did he see in her? Well, she had a nice figure, but that's about it. Those freckles that makeup artists put on every time they did a makeup job were a nightmare, but Jacob liked it. "I don't understand these men," Diana reasoned. "I'm probably doing terrible things to my friend," she thought, "but it's not my fault, it's Jacob. He's provoking me, stroking my arm, and for nothing. I can't help myself and do something shameless. And what to do? I'm a living woman, I justify myself. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. John's workday got off to a rough start. First of all, he only got 2 hours of sleep. And secondly, Mickey was waiting for him outside his office. Looking at him, John thought he hadn't slept at all, which was almost true. He'd come to work straight from the casino. I guess he hadn't completely lost his conscience because it was embarrassing to look John in the eye. He took him to work for him, taught him a lot of things, and considered him his friend. But Mickey was on the money. He was not only a good programmer, but also a talented mathematician. He developed an algorithm on how to win at casinos. It did not work at once. About a year he developed, tested in theory, and several times in practice. And all this time his program did not fail. He bought himself a nice car, a small apartment, though not in the center, but his own. After the first winnings, he visited the casino 2-3 times a month to check the new changed algorithms, and again Mickey was a winner. He was noticed and the casino workers became simply afraid of him, but he didn't abuse his luck. Once noticed, the very angry looks did not give the appearance, but did not go to the casino for 3 months. He began to live large, changed the apartment, a more prestigious in the center. He started vacationing abroad. This could not afford even the owner of the company, Comtech John, but Mickey could. When asked by a friend where such opportunities came from, Mickey replied briefly, "Luck." One day, leaving the casino, he was stopped by a man. He was dressed expensively. Mickey now immediately recognized branded clothing. "Listen, kid, tell me the secret to your success." To tell you the truth, Mickey was scared. "It's called luck. Don't take me for a fool. I know a little bit about computers too, and I used to be good at math. Tell me." "There's nothing to tell," said Mickey, getting in the car, but the man was persistent. "Look, I'm not for free. Whatever dough you want, I'll pay you. I don't need your money when I work for a great firm and casino luck is on my side." He thought he told his new acquaintance enough to get him off his back, but he was wrong. The new acquaintance wasn't backing down. One day, getting into the car after another good win, a lanyard was thrown around Mickey's neck from behind. He wheezed, kept the Veronica around his neck, making it a little easier to breathe. And only when his arms were hanging like whips was the grip loosened by patting him his cheeks. "Shall we talk?" an unfamiliar voice asked. Mickey could only nod. Taking a bottle of water and sipping almost half of it, he turned around. In front of him sat what appeared to him to be an unfamiliar man who had told him to keep the car lights off. "Ready, awake?" "Ready," he wheezed. It would have been a long time ago, and opening the door, Jacob shouted, "Go, he's ready." A familiar man sat down next to him and introduced himself, Jacob. Mickey said and grinned wryly, realizing that the man sitting across from him had known all about him for a long time. Jacob asked in a winning voice, "Look, I don't have anything to tell you. I have sketches, numbers, calculations, and they won't tell you anything, much less help you, and I can't explain anything." "Do you play blackjack or poker?" Jacob asked interestedly. "I play everything. I'm interested in where and how accurately my algorithms work." "You're not bluffing." Mickey didn't dignify him with an answer. He felt superior to the man who was listening with his mouth open. "I can tell you what bets to place, but I won't be playing that day. But let's agree that I'm not going to stand behind you for the rest of my life." "Okay, a month." "No, that won't work. I'm not at the casino every day. Let's do it 3 times." "No, that's not enough. 5 times." "Okay, 5 times and don't come near me again, especially not with the lanyard." "It's a deal." The evening at the casino began with Jacob undecided. He stood between the roulette table and the poker table. He chose roulette. The bets were placed and the game began. Jacob's game started right away. Tonight was clearly his night. Mickey stood behind him and whispered in his ear. The roulette partners smiled wickedly, the smartest ones leaving the table and the bravest losing their last money. "Come on, Jacob. Let's go. We have to stop in time." The man nodded, collecting the chips he'd won, and stood up from the table. He left the casino and quickly got into his car. Mickey was glad that his new algorithms hadn't failed him. The very next day, Jacob called Mickey, but he had other things to do. Don't you think I have other things to do than go to the casino every day? I'll call you when I have time, and he hung up quickly. Jacob was not happy. He stopped sleeping and took it out on Veronica, raising his voice at her and blaming her for everything. It wasn't until the following week that Mickey was able to go to the casino. But this time his system had malfunctioned and Jacob had lost in a landslide. He shook Mickey like a punching bag. "You can kill me," the man shouted, "but I warned you there's no algorithm in the world that never fails. You're gonna pay me back, okay? I'm not going to reimburse you, it happens. It didn't work for me every time." Indeed, the next time everything went well again. The winnings were so huge that the administration asked to pay the reward in installments, as they had a maximum amount that could be withdrawn. Mickey's intuition urged her to stay away from Jacob, but the desire to get a lot of money drowned out her voice. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that they were able to go to the casino again. Jacob was tearing up. Mickey had a work emergency, so he had to stay late to get his assignments in on time. The third and fourth camping trips were a failure, not at all. And Jacob had his fists in the air. Mickey had to take a week's vacation at his own expense, saying he had to go to his parents' house. Jacob was threatening him, and he'd already written him a letter telling him how much he owed him. But Mickey didn't have that kind of money. The last trip had been so modest that it hadn't even lifted Jacob's spirits, but instead lowered them to "I want to die." "You got the money?" "No, I don't have that kind of money, and I won't for the next 5 years." "Sell the car." "Why on earth would you play? I warned you the system was flawed, so it's not my fault." "Look, you're getting a little talkative. You might get in the car and not make it to the office. Get your money ready, asshole." To say Mickey was scared is an understatement. He tried to raise the money, but it was a pathetic attempt. "I've got a proposition for you," Jacob said on the phone. "I need some data on the orders your company got from Tony. You bring it to me, it'll clear the debt a little. We'll see about that. Your boss's firm is bothering me. There's too many of us on the market. Help me, I'll help you." And he decided to do it, figuring he'd do it with his shirt on. And so John's troubles began. And now Mickey was sitting outside his office and didn't know what to say for himself. It was embarrassing to talk about the shirt that was closer to his body. He suddenly remembered how much good John had done for him. As soon as Mickey walked into the office of the head of the firm, John realized that he would no longer work and trust this man. John wondered how he could be his friend. Those running eyes, the crunching of his knuckles, the pale face, and completely insincere look. He was all fake. Right now, he didn't like this man at all. There were many questions about him, and the main one was why had he been so ungrateful? After stopping at the door, Mickey went to the desk and looked at the manager and said, "John, let me write a letter of resignation." "You will, because I can't trust you as I did before. Don't look at me like a beaten dog. You won't see any compassion for me. Believe me, I had no choice. There's always a choice. You just have to do it right. You did it wrong. Tell me who you gave it to." "John, I'd advise you not to mess with this Christian. He's a real asshole. You two deserve each other. Tell me." When Mickey stopped talking, John felt that his story was true, that he was sorry for what he had done, but he decided not to say anything to him yet. "So here's the deal. What you did for Tony and then sold to Christian, you fix it yourself. John, I want you to back out of this job and give me the money up front. It'll be easier." "What are you talking about? You're suggesting I give up. Where am I gonna get the money to pay you back like you're suggesting? I pay my employees' salaries and you too. You don't want to give it back. It's a lot of money." Mickey shook his head. "Well, I don't think anybody would. You're going to call Tony and tell him you've come up with a much more interesting solution to his order." "But I haven't." "I see. Here's your assignment for the week. Work hard and surprise Tony. Then you write a statement and I'll never see you again." John's week was up, and he was still there. Nothing interesting came into Mickey's brilliant head. Friday night, John called him in. "How'd it go?" Mickey replied, shrinking back. "I'll give you an update on Monday. I've still got to check the calculations." "Is it really something interesting?" "I don't know. You'll see for yourself." John went to the store, bought Tom a new constructor, packed a cake, candy, ice cream, a bottle of good cognac, and rushed home. He felt good at the mere thought that he was welcome. After that evening, When Veronica said she was tired, they never spoke again. Maybe tonight, this Friday night, they could sit longer and he would finally learn the whole truth. Tom welcomed him like his own daddy, but unfortunately, he'd never gotten to experience parental happiness. Uncle John, hello. Hi, you're saying "are" so well. Good job. Veronica stood back and smiled, looking at the relationship between her son and a strange man. He was afraid of his own father. He had been raising him to be a man since he was 2 years old. Stop hugging and kissing him. He's not a girl, Jacob shouted. But he's just a baby hiding the baby behind his back, his mother replied. My orders are not negotiable, yelled the father. Don't scare the child. We're not in the barracks, replied Veronica. Why do you have such a long tongue? Why don't you respect your husband? Keep silent. No. She's attacking him with her fist. Veronica grabbed Tom and left out of her husband's sight. She was afraid of him. And with a strange man, her son felt calm and quite happy. How was work? You've been in trouble. You haven't been yourself all week. Yeah, but it's getting a little better now. Rat caught, cornered. You can't corner a rat. It can bite so hard to survive. It's easier to just let it go so it doesn't make things worse. It won't. John's phone rang and he excused himself to the study. She watched her son unwrapping a present and heard Christian's last name. Did Christian call again? John asked in surprise. What does he want this time? Don't say yes, let him go to the casino, or he'll have to take off work to visit your parents again. I know all about it. What else you got? How's the assignment? It's good. You've got a good head. Bye. Looking into Veronica's frightened eyes, John asked what's wrong. Who's Christian? Sorry, you were talking loud. Yeah, he's an ex-gangster that my employee leaked information to. He's got me in a lot of trouble. Tom, let's go pack. We're leaving. Grabbing the baby by the hand, she rushed upstairs to pack. Veronica, what's going on? And after 2 flights of stairs, he stood in front of the door to the children's room. Can you tell me what it was about the Christian name that scared you so much? It was the first time he'd ever seen tears fall in hailstones. It always seemed when they showed it in movies that it was a montage, that tears couldn't flow like that, one after another. But looking at this woman, John realized they could. If I don't leave your house, you're going to have problems not only at work, but in your personal life. He took her by the shoulders. You can answer in normal language. I don't need riddles. I have enough of them at work. She took a deep breath. Christian is my husband. He's the one I ran away from, the one who raped me when he and his friends got drunk. Mostly him, of course. One of his friends had a vase through my head. Another one held me down. And my husband was a bastard who abused me in front of them because I refused to let his friend to have a drink with them. That was the last straw. I didn't want to stay home anymore. And now he's looking for me. John was really dumbfounded that the thug was Veronica's husband and that he had allowed himself to be bullied like that. Do you understand now? You let me go now? But where are you going? You haven't even found an apartment. I'll stay in a hotel for a couple of days and I'll find what I need. No, Veronica, I won't let you go now. I'm not afraid of your Christian. You should be. He's a ruthless man, without shame or conscience. How did you end up with him? I told you about the siege. That's how I got involved. How do you know he's looking for you? I called Diana. She told me. You shouldn't have called. He can track you on your cell phone. Let's change your SIM card. Come on, don't scare the baby. Let's go to dinner. We'll talk later. John, I don't want to drag you into a fight with that monster. I'm a big boy and I'll take care of it myself. So Veronica stayed. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening when at last Tom got tired of playing and running around and went to sleep. John and Veronica were sitting in the dining room eating ice cream. Tell me, what does your husband do? John asked. He didn't like it when I asked him what he was doing. You don't have to get involved in my business, he told me. You know less, you sleep better. And I stayed out of it. But I did hear that his computer company was going through a rough patch. I know that he steals cars and jams the license plates. He once had men come to him with such faces that it's scary to remember. I've always tried to stay out of their sight, and Jacob's just as bad. Veronica, make your specialty coffee for the guests, and I was shaking, trying to put everything on the table and run away. They were always arguing, fighting, and they used a lot of bad language. My child. And I would go to the back room so my son wouldn't hear this outrage. I'm sorry I asked you to tell me, John said guiltily. The memories are difficult, and I can tell you're uncomfortable. She didn't answer him, but continued. The last time they came, they were strangers, young guys, quite handsome. I even thought, well, this time it would be without any language and the negotiations would be quiet. But no. One of them caught me by the arm and pulled me down onto his lap. Jacob jumped up and hit me. Why are you wiggling your ass in front of men? Get out of here. I didn't have to deal with him and I wanted to leave. Veronica, come have a drink with us, the guy said. Don't touch me. That's no way for a guest to behave in someone else's house, I yelled. He stood up, pulled me against him, and I fumbled for the vase and smacked him on the head. The other one grabbed me, my dress snapping as I jerked, and that's when Jacob decided to show his manhood. I looked at his angry eyes and I was scared, not because he might raise his hand to me again, but because for the first time in my life, I decided to cross what Jacob thought was a red line. I decided to go against his will, to rebel without fear of his fists. Mom had always idolized Dad, saying he was king and God to her. And she taught me to live the same way. Always shut your mouth at the right time. Mom taught me, then the family will get along. My mom wouldn't understand me right now. I can't accept Jacob like that, even though he's my son's father. She was silent, her tears preventing her from speaking, and there was nothing more to say. In the morning, while my husband slept, I packed my suitcase with my own and the children's things and left. I left the house that had long been my fortress and my golden cage at the same time, without regret. Jacob was no good ever, and the overbearing nature of his parents had left a mark on the boy's life. He always wanted to prove himself strong, self-sufficient, and all-powerful, so he asserted himself as best he could. Veronica tried not to bend under him, but she was afraid for her life and the life of the child. Are you going to divorce him? John asked. Of course. Then what are you waiting for? You write a statement and I'll take you to court. You have a minor Tom, so you'll have to go through this unpleasant procedure. Jack, the doctor who took you to the hospital, remember? He took all the beatings, wrote up a report that you needed surgery after your husband's games. So that's what we're taking to the police. Come on, John. He's gonna kill me. No, I'll just get a divorce. Then he'll really kill you and then he'll steal Tom. Why can't I have a husband like you? Kind, sensitive, child-loving, and Veronica looked at him with adoration. I'm far from white and fluffy and never have been. I can be rude, demanding, and even harmful. And if a person is a scoundrel like your husband or Mickey, I can always find the strength to tell them to their face. So don't idealize me. Everything I do for you and Tom is entirely of my own free will, and no one would make me do it against my will. I'm no noble knight. I'm as flawed as any man, but it's fair to say that I'd never allow myself to raise a hand against a woman or hurt a child. And you're a good mother. You have a maternal warmth that attracts Tom to you, and that's wonderful. You have a night to think. Either you change your life and we go to the court and the police, or you look for an apartment and shake from every knock, waiting for the husband of a bandit. The next day was Saturday. John was not in a hurry, so breakfast was delayed. The first question he asked his guest was, of course, about her decision. What have you decided about your life? John, I was up all night. I've been thinking that if I wasn't so, how shall I put it? Don't tell me, I'll figure it out, he added with a smile. Oh, you're making it easy for me. If I wasn't like this, I could have avoided so many problems. I've made so many mistakes, and every one of them is almost fatal. Don't scare me. Fatal means there's nothing you can do about it. I think you've got it all ahead of you. Your optimism is inspiring, but I'm scared to think what's ahead of me. You're gonna have a happy life without a tyrant. Do you have a good lawyer? No, I don't see any lawyers among my acquaintances. Well, that's easily remedied. Jack's doctor has a brother who's a very good lawyer, so we'll go to him. Oh my God, it was one mistake when I agreed to sign with him. I remember his every word, how he skillfully persuaded, insisted, but I held out for a year, pulled, said that a serious step, you need to think. But on the birthday of my son, he still talked me into it. He promised me a lot, as always, but I didn't need anything he tried to give me. I told him, remember, if you raise your hand against me, you're beating your son. He agreed, and really, for 6 months or more, I was the happiest woman. But then my wishes were no longer taken into account. He reminded me that he was in charge and his wishes were the law. How he wants it to be is how it should be, and everything else is dust. Jacob is king and God. It's become an unspoken law in our family. He's older, he's more experienced, so he'll decide everything. That's how my happiness ended. If I hadn't done that stupid thing, how easy things would be now. But we are not looking for easy ways. We need to get everything in the struggle, the sweeter the victory will be. Your gullibility is both bribing and infuriating at the same time. If you didn't know him, that's one thing, but he's already shown his hands in despotism and you still believe him. Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm stupid. Remember, in the difficult times, Veronica tried to realize what she had achieved by her 30th birthday. A despotic husband, a failed marriage, no job and no career, no home, no money, no nothing. So much for marital bliss. The only joy is a son. But that's a lot too. The woman reassured herself. Veronica, I love only you, Jacob tried to say softly. God, what a lie that was. Considering the constant humiliation and yelling. Do the women you love get beaten? Do the women you love get humiliated? No, no, and no. She no longer entertained the hope that her husband would ever be a better man and appreciate her. That's it. Hope was dead. Her illusions of marital happiness were gone like smoke. Veronica wanted to give him her life, but was left at a broken trough. Her marriage is a complete fiasco. Now it can be said for sure. Veronica didn't usually use profanity and had judged Diana when she used a 3-story mat before she could close her mouth. But now she was so shattered by her outcome that she mentally allowed herself to lose control of herself. John wasted no time in calling Jack and asking about Liam. Valadia, we need your Liam now. I've been waiting for that call, because after Veronica's visit to my place and the way she'd been patched up, it was unforgivable. I'll tell Keir, he'll call you. But Jacob didn't waste any time. He called everyone he knew who knew Veronica in any way. But he couldn't get anywhere in his search. Only Diana had been to this house twice, and not just to this house. Now she was calling him, whispering into the phone that she missed him. She was looser and more experienced than Veronica, but she was sticky. Jacob didn't like that, so when he saw Diana calling, he didn't answer the phone. He didn't know who else to involve in the search for Veronica. It had been 2 weeks since she and her son had been away from home. The news came from nowhere. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Victor's Day, the head of the traffic safety department, began with another disappointing report. Another traffic accident and another fatality. On the table, there were reports on accidents and traffic violations committed by drivers and analysis of the reasons for their occurrence. I decided to start with the tapes, distracted by a phone call. Morning, Victor. He recognized his old friend Christian. He didn't like to talk to him, but he had to turn to him and he helped him. So, adjusting his voice to a friendly tone, he answered Jacob. I'll get right to the point, knowing how busy you are. Go ahead. My wife disappeared 2 weeks ago. Neighbors saw her leaving with a baby and a huge suitcase. Didn't leave town by any means of transportation, so maybe you can track her. Are you kidding me? How am I supposed to track her where? All over the city? He was pissed at everyone, even though he knew the guy was innocent. Why all over town? You know my address. Look around the roads, see if you see anything interesting. All right, when did you say you disappeared? 2 weeks ago? Yeah. You have a lot of traffic accidents there. 2 in the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I've heard that. Well, can you help? I can't promise anything, but if there's anything interesting, I'll call you. I still have your number. It's a pleasure. I'll be waiting. Veronica certainly didn't realize Jacob was getting too close. The 2 weeks Veronica and her son had been away from home, he'd been sick and twisted. He was angry at his wife, wanting to find her and punish her for everything she'd done, but on the other hand, he marveled at her courage. Mr. Christian had never thought he would long for his wife and son. The house was uncomfortable and cold without them. He feared that she had not just left him, but had gone to someone else. Could she have decided to do that? He was afraid to answer that question for himself. He was afraid that she would ask for a divorce, which of course he would not give her. Afraid to know the truth, where and with whom his Veronica was. But despite all the anger boiling in him, he had to admit to himself that he missed Veronica. He missed her as a woman. She hadn't broken, hadn't been afraid, and for that she was worth respecting, Jacob thought, angry at himself for thinking that. What was she missing? How dare she leave him with a child? He had no answers to those questions. Jacob had lived with this woman for almost 7 years, and no matter what troubles happened between them, he had grown accustomed to her and loved her. He'd been unfaithful on occasion, and what man doesn't? But male adultery is quite different from female adultery. God made men that way, there's nothing you can do about it. His face was twisted with anger, and he didn't know what he would do to her if she were home right now. Yes, he wasn't the perfect husband, he'd hurt her, it was true, but why leave? And then in the collapse of relationships and families are always guilty of both. I saw his family and parental relationships in front of me. His father had always beaten his mother in front of little Jacob. He remembered how she used to wail when her husband chased her around the room. Don't. Calm down. It was awful. He felt sorry for his mother and he stood up for her. But she wouldn't go anywhere and she wouldn't take him away from his father. And when his father died, his mother didn't cry, just stood there looking blank. The neighbors would tell her to cry. The mother looked at them and answered, I cried all my tears when he beat me. There was nothing left. The women nodded understandingly and hugged her by the shoulders. Mother did not live long, but even the little that the Lord gave her, she walked with a smile and did not look back with fear. Those must have been the best years of her life. And his wife, what was she missing? A house full of trees, a beautiful son. You can't understand these women, Jacob thought, lying on the couch. He'd been neglecting his business a little, missing calls from his partners, Veronica on his mind. On Monday night, he got a persistent call from someone who didn't want to pick up the phone, but who wanted to talk to him. Yeah, he barked. Jacob? Well, who am I? To whom do I have the honor? I'm your wife's attorney, Veronica, representing her in divorce proceedings. My name is Liam. I prepared the divorce and property division papers. You'll need to review them, consult with your attorney, and give me an answer. The terms are more than good. Your spouse isn't out to rob you. Jacob jumped up from the couch. This was a well-known and very expensive lawyer. Where did my wife get the money to pay for your services? Is that all you're interested in? Don't you have any other questions? The lawyer asked in surprise. Where is my wife? I must talk to her first. I'm not authorized to give you her whereabouts. If she finds it necessary, she'll call you herself. Have a nice day. So she filed for divorce? She's offended, Jacob thought. He dialed her number, but nothing. She changed her "Says I am" card. He threw the phone down angrily. Liam arrived Sunday night. John went out with Tom, and Veronica had a long talk with the lawyer. He was a man about 50 years old, gray-haired, with a very soft, ingratiating voice, which disposes to a frank conversation. In a couple of hours, she laid out to him all the reasons why she no longer wanted to see her husband. I hate him. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to live in the same house. I despise him as a man and I want nothing to do with him. Let him sign all the papers and give me a divorce. I'd like to part with him in a good way. Maybe you should think about it. You have a child, a boy. He needs a father. And if his father disgusts me, shouldn't the child see happy parents? He'll only learn to beat women and hate his father. I won't stop them seeing each other, but I won't live with him. You're a determined woman, and you're tough on your husband. Every word you say is a sharp knife. If he heard you, he'd be hurt and offended, said Liam. Nothing. For his cheating and his abusive behavior, he deserves it. I lived with that monster for 7 years. He's broken all my wings. I'm an unhappy woman, Veronica confessed to the lawyer and cried. Only my son was a ray of light in that dark kingdom. Only by looking at him could I live in his father's house. But recent events have put an end to our family relationship. The limit of my patience is over. I want a divorce, and let him live as he wants and with whom he wants. He's always had a lot of women. He's never had enough of me. Liam looked at Veronica in her sad eyes and added, Everything will be as you want it to be. Don't worry about it. Tuesday morning, he got a call from Victor Jacob. Come over. I have an interesting movie for you. I drove, and with a whistle of tires, his tank took off. Jacob was in such a hurry that he was literally flying to meet Liam. He ran into the office, forgetting to say hello, and asked, "Did you find her?" "You'll see for yourself, but the big suitcase and the little boy are present." "That's her," said the man with the abnormally shiny eyes. "You sit down and calm down. Otherwise, I won't show you anything. Take a sip of water." Jacob took a deep breath, drank some water, and really calmed down. "Is that it? Are you okay?" "Yeah, sorry." "Look," and he turned the display to him. Looking carefully at what was happening on the screen, he recognized Veronica at once, but when she fell, he even flinched. "What's wrong with her?" he asked the Liam. "I don't know. Keep looking." The traffic resumed, and a young man got out of one car, lifted Veronica in his arms and carried her into the cabin, then took the suitcase, put it in the trunk, and put Tom in the back seat. He slammed the door shut and drove away. Jacob sat there, unable to say a word. Where was he taking her? "Hospital, I think. There are 2 clinics along that road. You'll have no trouble finding out if she's there or not. Here's the license plate number of the rescuer. That's John. They own a company called Comtech, and this is his address. Look for your fugitive if she wants to come back to you. She's my wife, and she should live where her husband lives." "I agree, only she doesn't think so because she hasn't come back yet. Maybe she's in the hospital, unconscious, but she's got her papers on her." "I think so, and the baby would have been returned to you. The police would have found you, I'm sure of it." Jacob was sad, but he didn't forget to say thank you. "I'd owe you one." "You want me to pay you back with money?" "No, I don't need money. If there's a problem, I'll come to you. It's a deal." He found the clinic where Veronica spent a week. They called the doctor Jack. "Hello," Jacob said, smiling sweetly. He obviously wanted the doctor to like him. Jack knew immediately who was in front of him. "What can I do for you?" "You had Veronica here a while back. I know who you're talking about. Who are you? And what are you interested in?" Jacob cheered up. The doctor was clearly in a good mood to talk to him. "I'm Christiane's husband. I'm interested in what happened to her and where she is now." "I don't know where she is now because I'm a doctor, not a policeman. You'll tell me what happened to her now." "Go ahead." "I have nothing to tell you except that she ran away from me 2 weeks ago with the baby." "That's it?" "Well, yes. What else did you want me to tell you? How many people raped her?" Jacob looked startled at the doctor. "What are you talking about?" "She had multiple lacerations. She was patched up, pieced together. All the beatings were removed, every bruise was recorded, and a doctor's report was written on the woman's condition after the surgery. I advised her to go to the police with these documents. I think they'll be interested in you. Any other questions for me?" "No." And the doctor left without saying goodbye. Mr. Christian didn't expect such a turn of events. When he left the clinic, he called his friend at the police station. "Valera, it's me. Did they say you filed a report against me?" "Yes, yesterday." "Why did you call me?" "You understand, I had it in my hands for 2 hours and they took it to the prosecutor's office. It's a very serious and competent document. The doctor's report is written to the letter. There's nothing to fault. Every bruise you gave her has been photographed. It's over, Jacob." "What does that mean?" "It means you're looking at a very serious charge of spousal rape from 8 and up." "Do you have anyone in the DA's office?" "No, but even if I did, I wouldn't be asking for that kind of a charge. I suggest you make a deal with your wife. Kneel on your feet, apologize, and if she takes the complaint, you're lucky." He hung up without saying goodbye. Clearly, Veronica's got John's help. He can't forgive me for trying to ruin him. "Okay, I'm not proud," soothed himself. A man can and lie on his feet, but the divorce will not give. With these thoughts, he went to John's address. Having called, he waited for the guard to open the gate, but the gate didn't open, only a small intercom window. "Who do you want?" "I'm looking for Veronica and my son Tom." "We don't have those. This is John's house and he hasn't had visitors in years." My nerves were on edge. "Open up, you thug," Jacob shouted, pounding his fist on the massive gate. But the guard didn't even bat an eye, just slammed the window shut. Veronica and Tom were gone. John had moved them into his one-room city apartment, which had been empty since he moved out of town. That's what the lawyer said. It's wrong for you to hide it in your house. You could get in trouble. Move it to your apartment, and if they ask, say they're renting it. I'd even draw up a contract and put a price on it. You don't have to take the money, but it's the right thing to do. John did what Liam said. Jacob didn't want to leave John's house, where he thought his wife and baby were hidden. He waited until evening, but there was only one owner at the house. No one had come out of the house. Could they really not be here? Then where? Where should I go to look for them? I absolutely have to talk to Veronica. I'm sure I can convince her to take the application, Jacob thought as he drove up to the house. He'd been out of the office all day again, ignoring calls from work again. All his thoughts on his wife and child. All week he'd been driving to John's house, but all to no avail. If I don't find him by Monday, I'll hire a private investigator. He had more experience and more time. Jacob partly understood his wife. He heard her. He'd raised his hand to her on more than one occasion. Veronica decided to get revenge, punish him for all his tears. She was trying to numb the pain that was tearing her up inside. He could certainly ask for forgiveness, even give himself and her his word, but he wasn't sure if he could change his behavior. This is the way he's used to living. This is how his father lived. This is how the neighbors lived. He did not say it was right, but seeing it from childhood, he could not change himself. After the birth, his wife blossomed. She became seductive. All the men who came to visit him looked at her, but she got her way. He was driving along the central street of the city and thought about how to fix the situation. Standing under a traffic light, he looked around and saw his Veronica, his son in the company of John. How to get out of the car, he didn't know. There was a huge tail behind him and everyone was honking. He rounded the corner and jumped out of the car. He tried not to lose sight of them. When he saw the two of them, he felt a lump in his throat. The fuses blew all at once, and it was impossible to contain himself. They looked like family. Not a single thought in his head, only rage, anger, and spite, which were bad counselors. He couldn't feel his own body. It was as if it had atrophied. Pulling himself together, he ran across the road and followed them into the mall. He didn't find them right away. They were sitting in a cafe drinking coffee. Tom was having a brownie. "Hello, son." Daddy shouted the child and ran to him and his arms spread apart. Veronica immediately stood up. She was afraid he would carry him away. But Jacob wasn't going to make her angry. On the contrary, he wanted to show with all his behavior that he wouldn't do anything bad. "Hello, Veronica. I've been looking for you. I missed you so much. We need to talk. I'm not going anywhere with you." "All right, let's sit here at the table and talk." John didn't interfere as long as Jacob was behaving appropriately. He knew they had to talk anyway. "Veronica, you two talk here, and Tom and I will go to the game room." "Okay, just not for long." During those 2 weeks, her husband had become a complete stranger to her. She didn't even want to look at him. "How are you feeling?" Jacob asked with concern. "You make it sound like you're mocking me." "Veronica, I'm sorry. I was out of line, but to be honest, I don't remember much from that night." "That doesn't excuse you, and I'm not going to forgive you. I almost died after your games. I can't see you." Jacob could barely contain himself. He'd never let anyone talk to him like that. Men were afraid of him. Girls looked up to him with adoration, and his wife couldn't find the words. "I filed for divorce. This time it's serious, and I'm not backing down." "How are you going to live? Is this the one you're hoping for?" And he nodded at John. "I've never relied on anyone, just myself. If you remember, I was working and making a good living. I'll go back to the fashion house and Tom will go to daycare like all the other kids. We'll manage." "You shouldn't do that, Veronica. I love you." "That's a strange kind of love you got there, Jacob. You beat me, you raped me. You don't let me out of the house. You don't let me talk to my girlfriends. You don't let me work. You don't confuse the two. Is that what you call love?" "Love is different. No one said it would be easy to live with me. It's easy to love when things are good. You try to keep your feelings alive when things are a mess. Forgiveness is hard, but if you want to keep your family together." She didn't let him finish. "I don't want to, not at all. When I think of your fists, my whole body hurts. I've heard a lot that the key to family happiness is to accept a man as he is, not trying to subjugate him to suit your whims. That's hard, but you've never been able to do it, and more importantly, you've never wanted to. So let's end this conversation. You're gonna work this out with my lawyer. Do you want money for a lawyer? No, I can handle it on my own. That John promised to help. John saved me from dying. No one stopped for a car. He came out and helped me. So you should be thanking him, not bankrupting his firm. What did you complain about? No, I was just comparing the facts. Well, if you've made up your mind and I can't seem to talk you into it, then I have a condition. I'll give you a divorce and agree to everything your lawyer tells me if you drop the police report. And if I don't, then this divorce case will drag on for years. It won't drag on for years. You'll go to jail, and I'll divorce you without your consent. Understand? She was about to get up to leave when he tugged her arm roughly, pulling her back into the chair. You will do as I tell you. I can't believe you're gonna let a kid have a black spot on his record. I mean, any decent organization is gonna have to show the father and mother. You don't care how your son is viewed. I don't think he'll thank you for it. Veronica thought for a moment. I'll go to the child and think about your proposal in peace. How do I get in touch with you? Your lawyer will contact you. Goodbye. Goodbye, Veronica. I'm not so easy to get rid of. Oh, I don't need to be reminded of that. And she ran to the second floor to find Tom and John. Where's Daddy? The child asked when he saw only Mommy. He went to work. When are we going home? Veronica looked at John for support, but he preferred not to interfere in family matters. You'll have to decide that for yourselves, John replied to her pleading look. Do you miss Daddy? Yes. Veronica didn't know what the right thing to do was, so she called Liam. I wanted to consult with you. Don't do it over the phone. I'll come over. Okay. After her meeting with Jacob, Veronica began to have thoughts. She kept coming back to the life she led with her almost ex-husband, and the more she thought about it, the more panic overwhelmed her. What would her son say to her when he grew up? Why did you deprive me of my father? What will she say to him? Tell them how he beat her or worse, raped her. She would start pacing the apartment, rubbing her temples with trembling hands. The child misses her father. Does she have the right to put him away for a long time, a very long time, and Tom? Will he ask her again when they go home to Daddy? Everything had been so easy before this meeting, and after talking to Jacob, there were more questions. Her insides twisted at the thought of Jacob's satisfied face and the smug look he'd thrown at his rebellious wife. But she could handle it because she wasn't alone. The main thing was that she'd had the strength to leave, or she'd have lost herself. Anything can happen in life. You can lose everything in a moment, but losing yourself is the worst. Anyone who knows me will tell you that I'm stuffed up. I don't see my happiness, a spoiled girl to her rich husband, but how scary it is to have everything and not feel happy. She was ready to give the appearance of this happiness for a small apartment, the opportunity to work and be near her son, or maybe to hell with those thoughts. She tried to push them away, tired of them. Glancing at her watch, Veronica waited for the lawyer. The doorbell rang only 2 hours later. Sorry, Veronica, I'm late. Traffic was terrible. Well, thank you for coming. I've been waiting for you. Now I can't take a step without your advice. Calm down and tell me. He realized from her frightened eyes that Jacob had found her and was probably intimidating her. How did he find you? How did you know? I guess from your condition. I don't know. We were with Tom and John at the mall and he came up. He was trying to be very nice and peaceful, but I saw something in his eyes that others didn't. He was staring at me from the corner of his eye, like a beast. Anger, hatred, rage, those feelings that sizzle him. He said to take the statement from the police and then he'd agree to all our terms, and if I didn't, he'd make the divorce last for years. He's bluffing. If you don't take the statement, he'll get time served and you'll divorce him quietly. That's what I told him, but he frightened me that it would be a black mark on Tom's record. His father's an ex-con, and he might not get a good job. And then Tom threw himself into his arms, and now he's asking me when we're going home to Dad. So I'm confused. What do I do, Liam? Whatever we decide to do is what we do. Don't take anything. You burn your bridges. You don't want to go back. You of all people know this man. If you show him you have any doubts or worse, fear, he'll never let you live. That's not what I'm worried about. In court, there may be a question of how you're going to provide for the child. You don't have a job. You don't have a place to live. Those are all arguments against you, so only the father can bring him up. He's got great facilities, money. It turns out he's an eligible groom, mansion, business, good looks. It's all in his favor. The court can give him a reprieve. What am I supposed to do? Get a job right away. Put Tom in daycare. The apartment will be rented for now, but it's available. Otherwise, there will be problems. If the kindergarten is a problem, I'll help you. Okay, I'll call work tomorrow. I think it won't be a problem. He was tired today. He had one more difficult case to finish, but it was a lot of sweat. That's why Liam felt like he'd been drained. You're tired, Liam. Why don't I buy you some borscht? Tom praised me today. Did he? Well, then I'm in. The lawyer left an hour later, leaving Veronica to ponder. In the morning, she called the fashion house, but unfortunately, they were short-staffed and turned her down. It was a blow. She couldn't believe that there was no room for her where she had worked for several years. It was morning on the clock, and she no longer had any energy. It was as if she was being forced to unload rail cars. The fact that she wasn't being hired ruined her already bad mood. She called the model home again. It's me again. I'm sorry to interrupt you from work. Maybe you know who meets clothes demonstrators. Veronica, I really don't. You're a good worker. I'm sorry to turn you down, but I can't just fire someone for your past performance. You took a long time to get ready. I'm sorry, and she hung up. Veronica cried, and covering her eyes with her palms, collapsed on the couch. She felt cornered. Nothing was working out for her. It was painful, hurtful, and she thought, unfair. And what are you so snotty about? The inner voice said. Is this a time to feel sorry for yourself? You're a fashion designer. Pull yourself together. Get your laptop and look. She jumped up. Tom was standing beside her, and he was sniffling too. Mommy, why are you crying so loud? Are you scared? I'm sorry, sweetie. I just remembered something sad. She wiped her tears, titting her hair as if someone could see her, and opened her laptop. Despite her hysterics, despite her resentment that she couldn't do anything, after sitting at the laptop for 2 hours, she found a job opening at a sewing factory and called immediately. Yes, we need a fashion designer. Do you have any experience? Veronica had nothing to say. I graduated from college as a fashion designer. I have my own work experience. How many years ago? Maybe I'd better come. I see. No experience. You graduated from college about 10 years ago. She didn't specify how long, because the woman was right. She's got nothing. No career, no family. Young lady, are you still here? The woman on the other end of the line asked. Yes. Come by tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Bring your work. See you tomorrow. She didn't hope for anything. Even on a penny like that, the administration wanted someone with experience. In the morning, having collected Tom, at 9 o'clock sharp, they stood at the gatehouse. A pass was issued in Veronica's name, and she entered the factory. The woman with whom she had spoken yesterday turned out to be a petite brunette, very pleasant looking. Who's that mommy's ponytail? She said to the child. I'm not a ponytail, I'm Tom. Will you go to work with him too? The woman asked sternly. No. The kindergarten is quarantined for the time being, but soon it will be open for children. Well, let's see your work, and you want to talk to the head of the experimental shop. It's our main department. It is there that new models of future clothes are developed. There we have modelers, designers, technologists who make samples of models. Finished her story, Megan. That was the name of this sociable woman. She opened a large folder with models and looked at Veronica. The patterns are old. We made them 5 years ago. Do you have any newer ideas? I have ideas. I just haven't had time to realize them, Veronica said in a high-pitched voice. Megan took her to the shop manager. Edward, here Veronica is the new girl. I told you about her yesterday. Will you talk to her? Yes, I would like to. In front of her stood a young man, blonde, with blue eyes and a dimple on his chin. He was a little taller than Veronica. Come in, he invited her, letting her into the office. They talked for about half an hour, and the boss agreed to take her on a 1-month probationary period. Our team is young, not afraid to put forward bold ideas, so we keep up with the times. I will be glad if you will settle in and will be useful to our factory. I'll do my best. Tomorrow to the personnel department and get to work. Veronica had been working at the factory for a month. She didn't like the work. It wasn't her job to design models, but she was good at it. Tom went to a private kindergarten a stone's throw from home. She rarely saw John, mostly on phone calls. Several times she'd been called in to speak to an investigator, and Liam had accompanied his client. He was so experienced, never let his client know offense. The investigators sometimes got lost talking to her. A month later, Veronica got a call from Lionel. "Veronica, have you found a job?" "Yes, I work as a fashion designer." "And why these questions?" "Will you come back to us?" "Diana got fired. She showed up drunk at a fashion show a week ago. We didn't see her. She fell down on the runway. It was a scandal. And yours was in the front row watching." "Are they with Diana?" "You didn't know?" "No, but I don't care. We're getting divorced. So you're coming." "I'm afraid to quit." "What if you forgive her and I have to leave, and no one will hire me here?" "No, don't worry. The director won't take her back. She's not a bad girl, but she's got no brakes. We're expecting you tomorrow." The feeling was twofold. On the one hand, she was glad that she was going to do what she liked, but on the other hand, she was uncomfortable in front of Edward because she had just started working and Jacob would be after her again. But Veronica wanted to go back to her old job. She felt she belonged here and her earnings allowed her to live without counting pennies. "Well, we have no right to keep you. I can only wish you all the best," said the foreman, and they said goodbye. In the morning, Veronica was in a great mood. Now everything will get better, thought the woman. They were in a hurry with their son to work, he to kindergarten and she to the fashion house. Sitting in the bus and watching what was happening outside the window, she smiled. She was distracted from her pleasant thoughts by a phone call. It was John. "Good morning." "Hi, I'm on my way to work at the fashion house. Can you believe it? Diane got fired for misconduct." She heard John laughing. "Why are you laughing?" "That's what you get fired for." "She came to work drunk," Veronica said in a whisper. "Did you think carefully before you agreed?" "You mean Jacob?" "That's right. I thought about it. What am I supposed to do now? Hide? Go to a job I don't like? Is that what you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you think carefully before you do anything. You're responsible for the baby," and he hung up. John shouted Veronica, apparently so loudly that the passengers looked back at her. She got there quickly. With a sinking heart, Veronica opened the familiar door and walked into the lobby, where she was enveloped by such a familiar smell. The guards greeted her and smiled, so they hadn't forgotten. The girls hugged her and tried to touch her. Veronica looks away embarrassed, clutching her bag. She's in her element. As she approached the principal's office, she bumped into Diana. She was in tears and looked at Veronica like an enemy of the people. "You waited? If I hadn't snapped, you wouldn't be here. Quiet, quiet, but you're a mean one. Jacob raised you right. You put a man like that in jail." She sniffled and walked away. What did she just say? The kind of man Jacob put away, the kind of man he took into custody. And she dialed the lawyer. "Liam, what about Jacob?" "What about him? He's in lockup where he belongs. If you're going to withdraw your statement, you can find another lawyer right away. I don't work with kamikazes." No, I just found that out by accident. That's why I called you to check. I'm working at the fashion house again as of today. I was afraid Jacob would come after me." "Don't worry, you can work in peace." Even though he knew someone in the prosecutor's office, they couldn't help him. "But your Jacob tried very hard. He's not mine and he'll never be mine again." "I like your attitude." After talking to the lawyer, I was in a life is good and living is good mood. There was peace inside. Now she could live her life without looking back. Great. Her life began to change the minute she was free of Jacob. This was the relief she had dreamed of all 6 years. Jacob was no longer her problem. Finally, she walked into the principal's office. Nothing had changed here, except that Elizabeth had gotten a little chin over the years, but she was still dressed smartly and tastefully. Veronica walked forward a little, eyeing Elizabeth. Her pink lips stretched into a smile, clearly pleased to see Veronica here again. "Are you happy?" She started the first conversation. "You're in great shape, as always," she said, looking her over from head to toe. "Yes, I'm happy to be back at home. Shall we sign the contract? Are you ready?" "I'm ready." She went to a few more interviews, had to see Jacob. But with a lawyer by her side, she felt very confident. At the trial, Mr. Christian behaved abominably. He kept trying to accuse Veronica of cheating on him. She's even living in his apartment now, even though she's still my wife. Your honored counselor, she rents this apartment. Here's the lease, here are the receipts. But this is John's apartment. But she has the right to rent any apartment, especially since this one is cheaper. She lived in his house while I was looking for her all over the city, shouted at the Hall-X. She wasn't just living, she was between life and death, beaten and raped. As soon as she got better, Veronica left and has been living on her own for a long time. After being beaten for all of 6+ years, it's a wonder she didn't become disabled, finished the lawyer. Jacob and Christian had 2 attorneys and they earned their bread honestly. The trial was postponed 3 times at the request of the accused, and they even managed to reduce the sentence by 3 years. The sentence was read for about an hour and Mr. Christian received 9 years in a strict regime colony. She breathed the air of freedom, and her heart missed John. But that's another story.
Pitiful technician's daughter. You'll never get out of the mud, laughed her classmates. And 15 years later, Carolina sat at the railway station on her day off and looked hopefully at the people passing by her. On a small table in front of the girl were laid out a variety of papier-mâché figures, very skillful, and hand-colored with acrylic paints, small animals, birds, scenes from children's fairy tales. All this regularly attracted the attention of potential buyers. Except that, having learnt the price, they immediately turned away sullenly with the words, "Why is it so expensive? My Thomas can make such nonsense in a couple of minutes, and paint it even faster. What's all this money for?" Caroline only pressed her lips together in embarrassment. She was asking for nothing. But the inhabitants of their provincial town, who were used to saving money on almost everything, did not want to pay for the labor of her invalid father, even if she was also thrown into the mud every time. "What kind of an exclusive you have that you ask so much?" Caroline tried to sell figurines at the railway station in the hope that some of the capital's tourists would be able to appreciate these creations. But she was quickly kicked out. She was told to pay a percentage or get out. Carolina wouldn't have minded paying for her workplace, but the amount the racketeers told her was a mockery, 10,000 a day. "Where am I going to get that kind of money?" she asked the big man in the tracksuit, who was not shy of smoking a stinking cigarette in front of her. "In a month, God willing, I'll be able to earn at least half of that." The burly man exhaled the acrid smoke into the girl's face with relish, then smiled wryly. "Well, it's what you wanted, baby. This is big business, by the way. If you want, you can always pay for the place in kind." The man gave the girl a steely stare that made Caroline want to wash herself at once. "Don't," she muttered grimly, lowering her gaze. "I'll pack everything up and go now, then." The bully hummed disappointedly. Caroline shook her head negatively. "We could make a deal." The creep held out his big tobacco-smelling hand to Caroline. However, the girl staggered sharply to the side, warningly. "I'm going to scream or call the police for help. Just try to touch me." The jock lowered his hand, and for a second it hovered in the air a centimeter from her face. Then he grinned and said playfully, "And you're not stupid at all, and you're beautiful. You shouldn't want to join our company. You should buy yourself some clothes. You walk around like a bum in your last rags." "I don't mess with bandits," the girl answered him in a serious tone and began to put her rustic luggage into a small sports bag given to her by her father. She was about to leave the platform when the bandit suddenly blocked her way with his massive torso. He looked down at her like she was a bug and smiled nastily at her. "Let me through," the girl mumbled without looking at him. The boogeyman in reply bent closer to her and in a low voice said threateningly, "You think properly, Caroline," he exhaled along with another puff of smoke. "Her name. You'd be better off with me, and it's in your best interest. You're almost out of high school. Where do you go from here? Do you know the connections I have in this town? If I say the word, no one will hire you. Not even as a cleaner. So you won't be able to continue your mum's career. I'll take care of that." "There's already someone to take care of me," replied the girl, boldly, looking the scoundrel in the eye. I said, "I won't come here again, let me pass. Or I'll really call the police now." "Is this about your daddy?" Or what? The man grinned and gave a bullhorn with the toe of his trainers. "He won't help you, if anything. And the police here think they all work for me." The thug looked around and added briefly, "Anyway, I've told you everything. Don't you say anything to him, and don't you pawn me off." Carolina, who turned 17 earlier this year, did look a little older than her age trim thanks to daily jogging and her technician mother's help cleaning the shops. And at the same time, slim as a graceful rose, she was admired by almost all the boys at school. However, because of the low social status of her family, no one, except for such criminals as this big guy was he himself looked no more than 20, did not consider the girl as a love interest. Caroline herself never looked for romantic adventures and devoted all her free time exclusively to helping her parents. But even if this scoundrel had suddenly turned out to be the last man on earth, she would never have agreed to be his date. The girl saw a couple of times, as near the only nightclub in their town, gangsters like him left in the arms of young, disappointed, dressed in short skirts. Caroline didn't have to guess who they were. She was old enough to realize how complicated real life was, but even in her worst dream, the girl couldn't imagine such a shameful future awaiting her. "I'll give you a sweet life in this little town. Don't doubt it," said the scoundrel. Standing before this unpleasant force, Caroline began to feel herself slowly but surely overcome by fear. After all, she was all alone in the station, and there was no one to protect her. Fortunately, at that moment, the villain's mobile phone rang, and Caroline, taking advantage of the fact that he was distracted, hurriedly slipped out of the bandit's sight. She returned home that day depressed and penniless. It was the last Sunday in May, which meant that she had the longest and most horrible week before graduation ahead of her. All her classmates would only talk about who and what dress to wear, and what hairstyle and manicure to choose for this important holiday. And guys will try as soon as possible to invite the prettiest girls of the school to the ball. And only Caroline, of course, no one will be invited to spend time at the last school party in her life. Nor will she have any dress, shoes, or manicure. "Honey, are you okay, Jennifer?" the girl's mother inquired cautiously. "You're all pale today. Didn't manage to sell anything at all." Caroline covered her eyes with her hands, unable to hold back the tears that were about to spill. "My girl, what's wrong? Has someone hurt you?" the woman asked again, clasping her crying daughter to her side. "I don't want to go to this stupid prom," Caroline finally managed to utter, trying to control her sobs. Jennifer stroked her daughter's soft, dark blonde, shiny hair and looked into her lovely golden brown eyes. "Honey, but prom is one of the most important days in any girl's life, isn't it? Are you sure you want to miss such an important event? There won't be a second time like this in your life," her mother warned her. Caroline only sobbed a couple of times, then sat down on the bed and began to wipe her eyes thoroughly with a handkerchief. "And it's a good thing it won't," she said. "What haven't I seen at this feast of female vanity? The guests will all do nothing but show off their expensive dresses to each other and drink cheap red wine, while the class teacher and the principal discuss the biggest gossip of the year in a corner of the gym." Jennifer smiled at her daughter, but Caroline saw a slight sadness in that smile. "Are you really that worried about not having anything to wear?" she asked affectionately. "I've already put some money aside for you for a dress. And the shoes, you can have my shoes. Do you remember the loafers like that? I married your father in them." Her mother's eyes clouded with unpleasant memories. Sometimes Caroline marveled at how much her parents loved each other, even though they had lived together for many years and endured hardships. Jennifer had come to this town from a remote village where she had been raised by her grandmother until she came of age. Unfortunately, Jennifer was never able to enroll in any educational institution to continue her studies. The knowledge she received in the village was barely enough to keep her from starving. The young girl was offered only low-skilled work as a cleaner, or, even worse, openly obscene offers. In order to get a foothold in this place and make ends meet, Caroline's mother got a job as a floor cleaner in the office of a taxi company near the station. It was there that she met Michael, her future husband. Michael had been working as a taxi driver for several years and was earning quite well. He was immediately attracted to a modest, pretty cleaner who came to their town from the province. Her purity and openness touched the heart of the man, so that soon the taxi driver invited the girl to the first date, after which he and Jennifer began to officially meet. About a year later, the couple planned a wedding, after which the young people happily lived in marriage for almost 10 years. During this time, they had Caroline, a charming daughter, the name Jennifer gave because of her great love for the flower of the same name. All this time, the woman continued to work in a taxi park, and her husband to drive the residents to the suburbs. The salary received by Jennifer was not large, but thanks to Michael, their small family steadfastly kept afloat, being able, though not lavish, but to buy everything necessary for life. The year that little Caroline turned 11, however, disaster came knocking. Michael was driving an elderly couple from the village back to the city. The weather that autumn was very wet, and it was raining constantly. Because of this, the driver had to be doubly attentive on the wet road, making sure that he could fit into the next corner or brake in time at the traffic lights. The elderly people Michael was driving, as it turned out, were very unrestrained and overly emotional. The elderly people Michael was driving were, as luck would have it, very unrestrained and overly emotional. They were constantly dissatisfied with something and threatened to write a complaint against the taxi driver. Because of this, Caroline's father now and then distracted from the road, trying to pacify the nagging couple. At one of these sensitive moments, the man missed a warning sign and, unable to control himself, smashed through an iron fence, sending him and his passengers into a ditch. The car flipped several times on the steep slope before stopping its fateful course. As luck would have it, the elderly couple were virtually unhurt, with only a few scratches, while Michael's life hung in the balance. His right arm was damaged so badly that the man risked dying at any moment due to heavy blood loss. Doctors miraculously managed to save his life, but the mutilated arm, alas, had to be amputated. When the taxi driver regained consciousness, he could not believe what had happened for a long time. How could it be? He was the breadwinner of the family. What would happen to his wife and daughter? Jennifer managed with great difficulty to calm him down and assure him that life goes on. No matter what happened, they would always be together. And she would do whatever was necessary to get them through these hard times. Since then, Caroline's mother has had to work 3 times as hard, taking extra shifts at the city hospital as well as at her daughter's school. Although Michael fell into a brief apathy at first, soon enough he was able to pull himself together. After all, with one arm or two, he continued to be the head of the family and could not allow himself to be completely supported by his wife and daughter. Caroline was by then already actively helping her mother. The man began to develop his left arm and look for ways to earn an alternative income. Naturally, working in a taxi was out of the question. After another 6 months, he mastered the art of creating papier-mâché figurines and weaving baskets from vines, for which he traveled to the nearest forest, where he collected suitable wood. Persistent and strong-minded, Michael was ready to sell the fruits of his labor himself. But to this occupation, all the local men who personally knew Caroline's father treated not so much with contempt, but rather with a slight sneer. They said that he had been a normal man, driving people around, and now he had stooped to selling baskets in the street. Then Caroline offered her father to sit instead of him on a busy shopping street of the town with his daughter. "Is it enough for you to walk the corridors to class with your mother?" she asked. The father refused at first out of pride. "It's not good enough for you. I understand how your classmates look at you because of that," he said. Caroline was embarrassed, but tried to brush it off. "To hell with them," the girl answered him, smiling. "I'm not doing this to amuse them, but because we need the money. You spend a lot of time on this weaving and figurines, and women are much more willing to buy such things. What about your studies?" Her father looked at her doubtfully. "What about my studies? Studying won't run away," Caroline answered him simply. "I will trade at weekends, and first I will try the squares, or the markets, then I'll go to the railway station. A lot of people pass by there during the day. Maybe we'll make some money." Michael furtively brushed a large tear from the corner of his eye. He thanked God every day for giving him such a beautiful, understanding, and supportive family. He could hardly have dreamed of anything more in his life. Except that it was a little hard without a hand. "All right," he agreed, "but only after work, straight home. I don't want you to fall behind in your classes because of this." "Don't worry," laughed back her daughter.
I learn new material quickly. As my teachers tell me, everything will be fine. Caroline shook her father's hand encouragingly and thought about how much she loved her family. For the sake of these people, she was ready to endure any difficulties, as long as they were healthy, fed, and had the opportunity to meet each new day with joy. Michael not unreasonably worried about the attitude of classmates to his daughter. No matter how friendly Caroline tried to behave with them, the school community flatly refused to accept her. Although the girl turned out to be the most attractive, not at all awkward in the class, and regularly received only excellent grades in physical education, other, more successful classmates only did that sought to tease Caroline at every opportunity. "What, Carolina? Are you preparing for your after-school program again?" Vanessa, the first beauty of the class, mocked her in the locker room. "Let me guess. Do you have an extra class today to carry buckets of water or not?" "Oh wait, must be obstacle course practice. You're jumping up and down the stairs with a mop?" Vanessa was laughing a hysterical, unpleasant laugh. Caroline had to restrain herself from saying something equally caustic and unflattering. The girl tried to avoid school fights, but it did not mean that she was ready to tolerate such an attitude to herself until the end of her senior year. "Vanessa, you'd better finish taking your weight loss supplements," she said calmly, tying her old trainers. The classmates' laughter broke off abruptly. "I'm serious. It's already melted your brains. You're laughing like a lunatic." Vanessa's face instantly contorted into a grimace of anger and disgust. Caroline realized she'd guessed right. Vanessa had been frantically trying to lose weight for the past few months to fit into the designer dress her parents had promised her for the prom. The only problem was that the size range of such outfits ended exclusively at size 42. "You little brat, you filthy little brat. You'll never get married with such a horrible pedigree. So you're wasting your time training and running 5 kilometers a day." The girl was ready to run even 10 kilometers. She spat out in anger. "The most you can be in this town is an elite call girl. And that's if you don't despise sleeping with a girl who's been mudding like a pig since high school." Vanessa threw with all her might at Caroline a dirty rag that the cleaning lady had left in the locker room so she wouldn't have to go far to get a change of clothes. The piece of cloth fell on Carolina's head with a loud smack, and all the girls in the room burst out laughing. "Serves her right, you upstart. Show her where she belongs, will you?" Vanessa was taunted by her friends. "You think you can open your filthy mouth here?" Caroline was shaking like a fever. She had never felt such hatred from others. More than anything else in the world, she wanted to disappear, to dissolve like vapor from water on a hot surface. She didn't realize how she had shouted in her heart to all those puffed-up puppets. "Choke on your anger. All you know is to wash the bones of blokes, don't you? You have no interests in each other's lives except money and rags. I hate you all, you puffed-up pussies." Caroline didn't realize how she had jumped out of the changing room. The girl rushed past all the other students and ran down the corridor right into the street. Once she was in the school stadium, she heard a chant. "Caroline." Class hadn't started yet. "Where are you going?" Harry, the gym teacher, shouted after her. But the girl didn't listen to him. She ran 5 laps in a row before her heart was able to beat again. Caroline didn't know where she got her ability to run, but she was sure that everything in life is given to a person for a reason. And if she had the opportunity to develop this ability, then she should use it, especially since running was the only thing that helped her calm down and bring her chaotic thoughts into relative order. Trying to regain her breath, Caroline approached her classroom. The boys, lined up in a row and unaware of what had recently happened in the girls' locker room, looked at their classmate with surprise, and some with outright envy. "Watch and learn." The gym teacher waved his hand in Carolina's direction. 3 kilometers in 10 minutes. "And your shoes are ready to be included in the Olympic team. Not like you idiots. To the left, go, 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 go." There was a loud whistle, and Carolina's classmates, with dejected faces, ran their standard 6 laps. "Well done, Caroline." Harry patted her on the shoulder. "Take a rest, bye. It's the first time I've seen results like yours in 5 years. A real talent." The gym teacher shook his head and went off to follow the older students, while Caroline sat on the sports bench and pondered his words. Sure, it was a little late for her to start a sports career, but could her running talents be applied in a more productive way? The answer to this question the girl has not yet found for herself, precisely because of the incident in the locker room, and also because of a series of regular petty bullying from other girls. Caroline did not want to go to the prom. However, Jennifer still managed to persuade her daughter not to miss such a momentous event. After all, it's better to take your diploma from them right away, so that you don't have to go there again, the understanding mother winked. But you must never show them that you are scared. And if you don't come to the graduation, that's exactly what you'll show them. Let's not give them something to gossip about. Okay, Caroline sighed heavily, but agreed. Okay, let this be my last fight. Jennifer helped to choose and buy for her daughter the most beautiful dress they could find in an inexpensive second-hand shop, a simple cut, but at the same time very elegant and refined dress in the shade of sapphire, which perfectly emphasized Caroline's slender, athletic figure and perfectly set off the noble and yet completely natural color of her hair. The wedding shoes, which Jennifer lent to her daughter, perfectly matched the outfit and Caroline's high hairstyle, which she had also made herself. It's a pity I don't have any jewelry at all, Jennifer complained, looking sadly at the girl's festive look. Why not? Michael suddenly joined the gathering and grinned slyly at his favorite women. Dad, are you what? Caroline looked at him uncertainly, and in her eyes Michael read anxiety and worry. Don't tell me you bought something for me. It ended sadly, Caroline said with a smile. I did. Her father nodded with a smile and pulled a small velvet box out of his shirt pocket. Caroline was incredibly embarrassed. Not only had her mother bought her a dress that was simply magical by the girl's standards, but her father had managed to throw away a considerable amount of money for her. Why? Caroline asked him guiltily. But Michael had already reached out to her and put a box in her hand. It's a little miracle. Open it, he said. Caroline opened the lid with a sinking heart. On a white velvet cushion lay a tiny gold pendant in the shape of a star. The five-pointed beauty shone proudly with its rays, even though it was no bigger than a fingernail on Caroline's index finger. Each ray of the star ended in a tiny shining crystal, and when the light fell on the stones, they lit up a myriad of colored lights. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Mother and daughter exhaled almost simultaneously. Michael smiled and said to the girl, Caroline, I want you to know that you, for me, will always be a guiding star that will not let me go astray from the right course. You and Mum are my two brightest stars. With these words, the man hugged first his wife with one arm and then his daughter, who clung to her father's strong and reliable shoulder. Thank you, Daddy, Caroline said through tears of gratitude. I will never take it off. I will always wear it as a talisman. Michael agreed with his daughter that he would pick her up from school in the evening after the party was over. It got dark early in their neighborhood, and teenagers, when they're drunk, are a mess. You never know what to expect from them. So her father decided to insure the girl in case the drunken classmates suddenly wanted to afford too much. When Caroline entered the assembly hall, where the event was held, many of her classmates quieted down, not immediately recognizing the girl. She looked around, deciding where she could best sit so as not to draw too much attention to herself. When Vanessa suddenly appeared on the horizon, like a shark's fin in the middle of a calm ocean. The queen never walks alone. For some reason, Caroline thought at that moment the first beauty of the class was accompanied by her own entourage, consisting of 3 girls and 2 guys. And the whole company was heading straight for her. Caroline noted to herself that Vanessa didn't wear the desired dress from a famous designer. Apparently, she couldn't fit herself to the notorious beauty standards of the famous brand. Instead, Vanessa wore a perfectly tight, extremely short leather dress, whose coloring was somewhere in the middle between a flesh tone and the color of bronze powder. Good thing it doesn't blend in completely, Caroline thought. Otherwise, you'd think she'd come completely unclothed. Well, here's our Cinderella, Vanessa said, stretching her vowels. Cute dress. Did you get it secondhand? It's okay. It's okay. You can wear it once, and then it'll be handy for scrubbing floors. Caroline gritted her teeth to keep from telling her what she thought of her provocative outfit. At that moment, Vanessa noticed the gold pendant around her neck. How lovely. The classmate's eyes flashed, and she reached out her hand to touch the jewel. "Don't touch it." Caroline sharply brushed her fingers away. "It's a present from Daddy," she said with a caustic grin. "It hurts." Vanessa replied with a scornful arch of her eyebrow. "It's just a cheap thing you bought on sale anyway." "If I asked, my parents would give me a dozen of them," Vanessa said. She turned and led the other boys, who followed reluctantly after their leader. Caroline chuckled softly. It seemed that Vanessa's superiority was beginning to bore even her most devoted fans. After the graduation ceremony, the real disco began. Under the influence of good mood, invigorating music and hot drinks, everyone danced. As they say, who can do what they like? Caroline did not dance. She wanted to leave immediately after receiving her papers. But the headmistress asked her to stay and be with the guys a little longer, because it was the last time we were all together. Although Caroline was not particularly eager to continue the evening, she gave in to the headmistress' request. When the slow dance sounded, the hall was illuminated with soft and languid light. The girl saw someone approaching her. The figure emerging from the pink smoke was Andrew, Vanessa's boyfriend. "Hi, Caroline." Andrew began, smiling languidly. "You look really good tonight. Can I ask you to dance?" Caroline was embarrassed. She realized that something was wrong. Why would Vanessa's boyfriend ask her to slow dance? "Wouldn't your lover be angry?" She tried to joke. She couldn't believe that the most handsome guy in the school wanted to dance with her. A slight shadow ran across the guy's face. "No, she won't. I'm sick of her." He rolled his eyes. "All I hear every day is, Andrew, am I pretty, Andrew? Am I pretty, Andrew? Have I lost weight? The scales don't seem to be reading right," and so on and so forth. It became impossible to communicate with her. Caroline held back a laugh. No one had ever portrayed Vanessa so vividly and seemingly. "Yes, she's very fond of herself," the girl nodded. "Okay, but just one dance. I have to go home soon." "If you say so, beautiful lady." Andrew smiled and, making an elegant gesture, offered his hand to the girl. Caroline danced a slow dance for the first time in her life. It was an amazing, unlike anything she had ever felt before. It was as if a whole swarm of small colored hummingbirds had been released inside her, and the tiny birds were flying all over her body, giving every movement of the girl a truly airy lightness. Andrew looked at her so intently, as if he really wondered what Caroline was like. What kind of person was she? What is she like? Immersed in her romantic thoughts, Caroline did not immediately notice a figure with a touch of bronze powder flashed behind her. "Get out of here," Vanessa hissed. Caroline had no time to react when Andrew's strong hands grabbed her by the shoulders and turned her around to face her rich classmate. In the next second, Vanessa spewed a huge amount of tomato juice from a paper bag at her with all her might. Caroline gasped at the nasty, brackish taste. The first minute she was afraid that she had poured real pig's blood on her, like in a popular horror film. "Drink, drink, you cesspit," Vanessa said, pouring juice all over the unfortunate classmate. "You miserable fool. What are you doing? Did you really believe Andrew just wanted to dance with you? You thought he liked you?" Vanessa tilted her head and started laughing like a lunatic. The smoke and the light made it look like Caroline had been doused with something black like tar. Stop it, Vanessa, you're crazy," Caroline shouted back at her, trying to get out of Andrew's grasp. He released her, and she began to shake off the sticky, salty liquid. Her dress was hopelessly ruined, as was her hair. And what was most tragic of all, her mum's wedding shoes. "God, how can you be such a monster, Vanessa?" Caroline asked her in despair. "Why do you hate me so much?" Vanessa condescended to answer, smiling with all her 32 teeth. "It's a joy to hate you. I despise you, Caroline, because people like you are always trying to get out of your dirty hole, like mice waiting for someone to deliver cheese for them outside. You should know your place and keep your head down," Vanessa said. "What do you think? I didn't see you flashing your legs at our boys in gym class." "What, Caroline?" From the shock, Caroline struggled to speak. "Vanessa, come on. I'm just a good runner. And it's nobody's fault that you can't stop eating fries in packs." Apparently, that last remark had finally pissed Vanessa off, and all the anger and meanness that had been in her until that moment came out. She took a swing at her classmate. Vanessa sharply lowered her perfectly manicured hand and grabbed the chain around Caroline's neck. and pulled off the pendant Michael had given her. "Did you think you could be better than me?" Vanessa whispered, clutching Caroline's gold star in her fist. "But I have money and social standing, and all you have is your filthy rag, which you will use every day for the rest of your life to mop the floors of this school or some rundown hospital on the outskirts of town." Caroline lunged for the wretch, but Andrew grabbed her arms, preventing her from resisting Vanessa. "Give it back. Give it back now," the girl shouted tearfully. "You have no right to even touch him. You're the most disgusting person I've ever known. Give me the pendant back." Vanessa held the pendant up to Caroline's face, knowing full well that she couldn't take it away from her. Then she released the chain from her fingers, and the little star swung in front of her nose like a hypnotist's pendulum. "You're a pathetic cleaning lady's daughter, and you'll never get close to being a normal person," Vanessa said in a thick, low voice. "Repeat after me. I know my place, Vanessa, and I'm the pathetic daughter of a maintenance worker." "Go to hell," Vanessa Caroline said, glaring hatefully at the blonde in the leather dress. The resentment swept over her head, preventing her from snapping out of the feeling of all-consuming anger. "Do it again, or you'll never see your jewel again," Vanessa whispered again. She wanted to throw the pendant on the floor to crush it with the heel of her lacquered shoes. But at that moment the general light flashed brightly, and the teenagers saw Megan's headmistress looking at them with all the sternness she was capable of. "What the hell is going on here, Vanessa?" she asked the rich alumna angrily. Then she glared menacingly at Andrew, who instantly released Caroline. The girl didn't hold back her feelings and slapped the henchman with an impressive slap. "You filthy henchman," Caroline said through gritted teeth. Then she held out her open palm to Vanessa. "Give it back. What you took now." "Vanessa." The headmistress looked at her reproachfully. Vanessa put the pendant back into Caroline's palm, being careful not to touch her, after defiantly wiping her hands on her dress. "Megan, can I go home?" Shaking with humiliation and resentment, Caroline asked her. "My dad is probably waiting for me outside." She realized that at that moment she had become an absolute laughingstock in front of all the students and teachers at her school. Megan looked at the girl with genuine regret and said briefly, "Of course, dear, go. Have a happy life after school," she added belatedly. But Caroline was already closing the doors to the assembly hall behind her, and at the same time to this horrible part of her now definitive past. After graduation, Carolina had been in a terrible state. For almost a month, not wanting to go out, she hadn't discussed what had happened with her parents. When Michael met her at the school and saw in what moral and physical state is his daughter, the man was ready to tear and throw. "Daughter, just tell me, who are the bastards who did this to you? They're your classmates, right?" "What difference does it make?" Caroline waved it off. "Forget it, Dad. It was just some fools playing a joke on me like that. Luckily, I don't have to hang out with any of them anymore. I can't even see this school. Let's go home." The distraught father calmed his daughter down as best he could, but he returned home feeling quite upset. His sacred duty was to protect his daughter's own blood. And now this. And Caroline, a light-hearted person, flatly refused to reveal the names of the villains. Michael could not, with all his will, break into the school and shake this information out of the teachers. Jennifer reassured her husband, saying that if her daughter didn't want to talk about it, then there was no need to get involved, so she had to deal with it on her own. Besides, she assured her husband, "Caroline always knows that we are close by, and we will always help her with everything she needs. Our daughter is very strong. If she needs our help, you and I will know about it, believe me." Caroline, meanwhile, was lying on her bed, clutching the tattered chain of her pendant in her hand. It wasn't even the dress or the nasty words Vanessa had said that hurt the most. Most of all, Caroline was tormented by anger for the spoiled gift of her father. She realized that the chain could be repaired, but she didn't want to burden her parents with it, telling them that she had just taken the pendant off and put it back to her. Caroline contemplated her future. Now that the hated school was over, the girl could for the first time consciously choose what to do with her life next. She realized that she had no prospects in this city. But to enter a good university in the capital also required a lot of money. And where to get it from? A regular part-time job. From the backwoods. And Caroline couldn't just leave her parents like that. They needed help, including material aid, The girl listed in her mind what she could do best. But alas, the list wasn't that long. Running, cooking, and the ability to wax floors to a shine. God, Caroline thought, was Vanessa right after all. And I'm not going to get anywhere in this life with these opportunities. Bitter tears ran down her cheeks. It turned out that her classmate, without knowing it, had predicted her future. But Carolina was not one of those who let circumstances overrule her so easily. Therefore, the girl decided to do the following. She wanted to work all next year to save a sufficient amount of money. After that, the girl intended to go to try her luck in a large regional metropolis. There she wanted to take a course in her profession, and maybe, after passing it, find a good job with a decent salary in the center. Caroline realized that it would be a difficult path, but she was ready to endure everything to change her life, thus getting rid of Vanessa's humiliating prediction. Having told her parents about her plans, Caroline sighed with relief. They were not against the girl to try to find a decent job. Michael and his wife were very happy that their daughter finally began to come out of that terrible state. "I will continue to help Mom and Dad," promised Caroline. "But I have to think about my own destiny. I want you to be proud of me, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to achieve my dream." A couple of days later, Caroline took her CV to a recruitment agency. She offered her services as a maid and, if required, she could also act as a cook, preparing simple meals. To her surprise, the call came quite quickly after that. In just a week, the girl was already sitting in front of a female employee recruiting domestic staff for wealthy homes. The woman scrutinized her profile and then looked at Caroline intently in the eyes. "What about your stress tolerance? Can you handle unusual situations normally?" The girl was somewhat taken aback. It was the first time she had ever been asked such a question, but she answered nonetheless. "Depends on what you mean by the word unconventional." The recruiter raised an eyebrow that was perfectly fine, like a thread, and began to curl her fingers. "Well, for example, if you are suddenly insulted without reason, from your point of view, raise your voice at you, or, on the contrary, show you special attention, maybe even with elements of a slight flirtation." Caroline gasped in amazement. "Excuse me, do you want to employ me as a maid or, with all due respect, sell me to a not very decent establishment?" The girl realized that after such words she would probably never get a job. But she couldn't help herself. Whatever it was, she wouldn't let anyone humiliate her again. Never. The employee nodded her head briefly and made a note in her notebook. She then raised her eyes to Caroline again. "Well, you answer more or less politely. And your reaction is quite adequate. I will report these points to my superiors so that they can make a final decision. You see, you've had 3 maids leave this place before you, and every one of them felt obliged to tell me in color that they were not warned about how bad it was going to be." "Is that a warning?" I asked Caroline, just in case. "Consider it a warning," the personnel officer nodded. "Expect to be contacted within 3 days. If you are contacted within that time, you are accepted. You will learn the rest of the details of your job on the spot. And yes, I almost forgot. You will be required to live on the employer's premises for the duration of the contract." Caroline nodded in agreement. It was all very strange, but all the more exciting. She really wanted to be hired for this position. The salary was more than generous. There would be something to help her parents. And even if these unusual situations arose in the course of business, she would not give herself an offense. 2 days later, Caroline's mobile phone rang happily, informing the girl that she had been accepted as a maid in the house of a rich businessman. "Mom, Dad, hurrah. I have a job now," Caroline happily announced to her parents. "They said they would pick me up in 4 hours. "I'm going to go pack," Caroline said. Jennifer breathed a sigh of relief and crossed herself. Her husband gently hugged her with the arm that had survived the accident, and the girl's mother slowly lowered her head onto her husband's shoulder. "Here is our girl going into adulthood," she said slowly. "God, I wish she'd do well there." "Don't worry," Jenny Michael held her close. "Remember, you told me yourself that our daughter is a very strong person. She'll get through anything." When it was time to leave, it was not without tears. Her parents saw Caroline off with all the tenderness and warmth of their hearts. expecting her to come back next weekend to share her impressions of her new job. Carolina was picked up from her home 9-story building by a huge black business-class UE. When the girl climbed into it, it seemed to her that she was inside a cruise liner, so huge was the space of the car interior. The driver turned out to be a not very talkative middle-aged man who calmly drove her to the desired destination. When she got out of the car, Caroline couldn't believe her eyes. In front of her stood a gigantic 4-story mansion, made in a completely modern style with glass and chrome metal constructions. Caroline thought involuntarily that the owner of this house must be very fond of shopping centers, if he had decided to live in one of them. She didn't voice these thoughts out loud, of course. Instead, she obediently followed the head housekeeper and housekeeper who led her to the pool, instructing the new employee along the way. Try not to make eye contact with Oliver when he asks you something. It's best to lower your gaze and answer in a matter-of-fact manner. If you're cleaning a room and the owner suddenly walks in, you shouldn't fuss or pretend to notice his presence. Just get on with your work. Oliver is used to all the servants moving about and working almost silently. You're part of this house, and in a way you have to blend in with it and everything that goes on here. Often we don't pay attention to the owner's little quirks, the housekeeper continued. We only call the guards if we realize that it could endanger his life and health. Caroline was silent, but she felt as if she were in some modern fairy tale about an enchanted castle where everyone was silent and could not say a word to the cruel king who ruled this high-tech kingdom. The housekeeper's last sentence, however, surprised Caroline somewhat. "Excuse me, I think you said something about quirks. May I clarify what exactly was meant?" The housekeeper stopped and looked at the girl as if she were trying to see through her thoughts with invisible X-rays. "You were not warned by the agency about possible irregularities, were you?" she asked dryly. "Do I understand correctly?" "No, why not?" "They explained to me that there were some special circumstances, but what were they?" The housekeeper raised her eyebrows elegantly. "Well then, you'll soon see for yourself." The woman led her to a large rectangular pool, on the marble terrace of which sat a young man reclining in a sun lounger. He was wearing large sunglasses, a bright red Hawaiian shirt, and white knee-length shorts. The guy looked to be about 24 to 25 years old. Judging by his relaxed manner and the way he was calmly flipping through the newspaper in his lap, he was the owner's son. Please, the housekeeper nodded to him. Caroline arrived exactly 10 minutes ago, as the master had requested. After that, the lady silently left, leaving the girl and the young man alone. "Hello," Caroline greeted him politely. "Excuse me, do you know how long we have to wait for Oliver?" The man froze, holding the newspaper half open, and then looked at the girl in surprise from under the shimmering glasses. "I don't understand," was all he could ask. "Excuse me, but you must be the son of the owner of this house, aren't you?" Caroline answered the question with a question. "I just can't get used to how many rules there are here. I wanted to ask you about them before I met Oliver," she continued. The young man continued to stare at the maid in mute amazement. She, not knowing what to do in such a delicate situation, just stood there staring back at him. Finally, the man couldn't stand it any longer and laughed loudly. Caroline felt incredibly stupid, but still managed to squeeze out a weak smile. "Honestly, I've never had one of those before," he said through his laughter and came close to Caroline. The girl blushed instantly, not knowing if she could back away from him at least a couple of steps. The master's son came so close that Caroline could feel the fabric of his fluttering shirt with her hand. "Caroline, that's your name, isn't it?" he asked with a playful smile. "Did Amanda say it right?" "Yes, that's right." Caroline looked up at him again. "Now, Caroline, the owner of the house is not coming here for the simple reason that he is already standing in front of you. I am Oliver." Caroline stood still with her mouth open in astonishment. Without another word, the young man pushed his glasses back over his eyes, and then strode off at a steady pace toward the stairs leading to his private wing. He threw her a final glance without turning round. "I like you, Caroline. You are now definitely accepted. Please tell Amanda and ask her to come and see me when she has a free moment." With these words, he disappeared, leaving Caroline in a half-faint with excitement. Caroline told the housekeeper that the master was waiting for her. She pressed her lips together and showed her into the back room, where she gave her all the necessary clothes and the key to her room. Remember, we rise at 6, so you won't be seen or heard. And no matter how embarrassed you are, you must continue to do your job. Do you understand? Understood, Caroline replied, thoroughly embarrassed. Caroline went to her room to change. Thus began the working day for the girl. She soon realized what Amanda had meant when she spoke of Oliver's quirks. It turned out that he loved to host big costume parties with loud music, beautiful women, and expensive drinks. Besides Caroline herself, there were about 15 other people working in the house, and they all behaved as if they were exactly the same things in the young millionaire's mansion, like some floor vase or a painting hanging on one of the walls. It was, of course, very disconcerting to the girl that all the employees of Oliver's house were acting quietly and inconspicuously. After all, Oliver had clearly made it clear to her that he could socialize with them as ordinary people. Amanda, however, continued to insist on numerous rules of behavior even after her host had summoned her to talk to her. Well, Caroline couldn't cross her either. In the first month of work, she received a substantial advance on her card, part of which she immediately sent to her parents. Oliver remained an inscrutable mystery to her. He could easily walk up and kiss one of the young gardeners he paired with her. They were twin sisters and tended an incredibly beautiful winter garden, but at the same time he never allowed himself any flirtations of a certain kind with her or them. For these purposes, Oliver had far more experienced girls who could safely be called mistresses. One named Molly stood out among them. The long-legged, red-haired beauty spent most of her time with Oliver, and he, in turn, increasingly applied the definition of fiancé to her. The entire staff of the house concluded that soon the young people would be married and their master would have a legitimate wife. However, this eccentric rich man had a completely different side. Very often, especially in the evening, Caroline found the young man immersed in the affairs of his company. He would sit for hours at his desk, and sometimes Caroline was sure he worked all night long. She had never once heard him say a rude word to anyone in the household. And if any of the workers made serious mistakes, Oliver always spoke to them in private, locked away in his office. But his fiancée Molly did not share this peaceful coexistence with the staff. She was always picking on everything, shouting at everyone, and the young maids, including Caroline, tried to bring her to tears. "Why are you talking here during working hours?" she shouted at the girls. "Don't you have anything else to do? Look around, dust, dirt, carpets. You're not sweeping properly. Get back to work, you slackers. Well, when Oliver and I get married, I'll get to work on you. How many of you have Amanda taught you? It's all over the place. What are you looking at me for? Look me in the eye when I'm talking." Molly growled at them like a wild tigress, imagining herself the mistress of the house. The maids held on with all their might, unable to endure her terrifying screams and shrieks. God forbid Oliver should marry that Molly, one of the maids complained to her in the kitchen. "Caroline, then we'd all be ruined." "What can she do to you?" Caroline asked her with a smile. "She's not his wife yet. You're not panicking yet." Millie looked at the girl and said with bitterness in her voice, "You just don't know her, Caroline. This is not a woman. That's jealousy and greed combined. Only in stilettos. She'd run us all to pieces, I'll bet. She's jealous of her master's every plate. The other day she complained to him that we were too pretty to walk round the house and charm him with our slim legs." Beatrice and Caroline laughed together, realizing how absurd the situation was, especially when it came to a man like their master. "I can't lose this job," Beatrice continued sadly. "I have a little son in the village with my mother. I work here and send them money so that Matthew will not need anything." "I understand," Caroline said. "My parents have always lived very modestly in another town, so this place is a real chance for me to make a name for myself." Beatrice looked out the window at the full moon hanging over the horizon and smiled dreamily. "Oliver's very good," she murmured, as if in confidence. "He has his quirks, of course, but he's not as cruel as Amanda says he is. I suspect she's made him look like that to us on purpose, so that we'll work harder and not relax." "He is a little strange," Caroline agreed, and looked away from Beatrice, lest she should read into it the feelings that Caroline felt every time she remembered how close Oliver had been to her. He is very young, and for the owner of such a huge company, how had he achieved all this? He inherited it 3 years ago, Beatrice replied simply. Since then, he's had these oddities of working non-stop and resting all the time. His father, Marcus, was poisoned at a business dinner. The police were never able to figure out who did it. You could say the culprit is still walking free. And Oliver is very afraid that at any moment he could be next. Really, Caroline was genuinely surprised. Well, yes, Beatrice nodded. Caroline was struck to the heart. She had never imagined that such a tragedy could have befallen this outwardly light and cheerful person. I think, Beatrice continued, that all these parties and phobias, like the fact that he always takes our cook, Kevin, and one of the maids with him when he goes to other cities, are all ways of distancing himself from this personal drama. Oliver, he loved his father so much, he can't seem to get over losing him. And the bastards who sent Marcus to the grave never got what they deserved. I guess it's all hit him too hard, Caroline muttered thoughtfully to herself. Who would have thought that the rich had more trouble than the common people? All the next night, Caroline could not sleep for some unknown reason. Everything seemed to be going well, but her mind drifted back and forth to Oliver. I wish I knew what kind of man he really is. Maybe this bravado is just a mask, someone more vulnerable, someone she could probably help. A couple of weeks later, exactly what Beatrice had told her about happened. Oliver was going on a business trip of great importance to his business, and, as he always did, he took Kevin, his longtime cook, and his maid with him. The latter, to his great amazement, was Caroline herself. "Why are you so surprised?" Oliver asked her with a slight chuckle. "I need someone I can trust 100% to clean my room and control the food I eat during the trip. I don't think it's a big deal." "Yes, but you don't know me at all," Caroline objected. "I haven't been with you that long. What if I can't do it?" The young man's face took on a serious expression, and then he replied in a voice that sent shivers down Caroline's spine. "Well, if you can't do it, then you and I will have to part. Or we can do it right now, if you're not sure you're ready for a business trip. Because that's what a business trip is to you." "No, it's not. Of course I'll go with you," Caroline said with her lips pressed together. How could she be so foolish as to think that this calculating businessman could have a soul? If Beatrice was right about his worries about her father's death, he was either hiding them very well, or her friend was mistaken. Because how could a man who was ready in 2 seconds to fire another man standing in front of him at that very moment be worried? No, Caroline shook her head as she left her boss's office. Oliver could be anything, but he's certainly not a bereaved person in need of comfort. When all the things were packed and Caroline and Kevin were getting into one of the 2 large jeeps, one for her and the cook, and the other for Oliver and his guard, Kevin said to Caroline with a kind smile, "Don't you worry so much, my dear. I've been traveling with the owner for years, and it's always been fine. It's only for a couple of days. There's nothing to worry about." Caroline answered the cook with a calm but somewhat detached smile. She herself was pricked by something inside her. A bad feeling plagued the young maid. Suddenly, looking up at the upper windows of the mansion, she thought she saw a familiar silhouette flicker into Oliver's study, for a tiny fraction of an instant. She even thought she saw someone's fiery red hair through the window. But it couldn't be. Molly had gone to some foreign resort the other day, and was not expected to return for another week at the earliest. "It must be your imagination," Caroline said to herself. "You should read less detective stories at night." With these thoughts, the girl got into the car. At first the road was good, and the way through a dense forest seemed to the girl even picturesque. But gradually, the closer they got to the wide stone bridge, the more potholes were encountered on their way. The driver explained to Caroline that the road had not been repaired for a long time, and therefore they had to be especially careful here. "You don't have to explain to me," she nodded, remembering the tragedy that had happened to her own father. The driver wanted to say something else to Caroline, but suddenly he was attracted by something unusual happening ahead with Oliver's car. His business car, which was considered one of the most reliable in the world, suddenly began to swerve on the road. Every now and then his driver was swerving sideways. "What the hell is going on up there?" was all the driver of the Jeep with the cook and the maid could manage to say. When the car in front of him went over the bridge railing at full speed and fell into the water with a loud splash. "Oliver," was all Caroline could exclaim in despair. But then their car began to do the same kind of pretzels. "What happened?" Kevin asked, horrified, his huge blue eyes now huge. "Are we all going to crash now?" "Don't talk rubbish, Kevin," shouted the driver, trying to hold on to the steering wheel. "I don't understand. I just had a full inspection last week. What the—" He didn't have time to finish, because their Jeep also failed to slow down and went full speed into the river after Oliver's car. Caroline couldn't remember exactly how she'd ended up underwater. It was just a protective reflex, and she opened her eyes, being already a few meters into the deep abyss. The cabin was completely submerged. This she realized at once. Sitting next to her with his eyes wide open was Kevin. Blood was oozing from the wound on his temple. And Caroline realized with bitterness that the poor man had obviously been hit when the car fell. He was dead, and so was the driver, who was almost immediately choked by the powerful torrent of water. Being an excellent swimmer, Caroline had good lung capacity, so she managed to get out of the Jeep quickly enough. The girl looked, trying to find the second car in the murky water. Finally, she saw it. Oliver's car was buried up to its bonnet in the mud, sinking to the bottom of the river. After swimming a few more meters, she saw Oliver's hands floating in the water, which she grabbed and began to pull him upwards, away from the submerged car. With great difficulty, Carolina managed not only to pull her boss up, but also to drag him to the shore, and from there to the nearest road. There, Caroline was able to stop the first car she could find and call an ambulance. Until the medics arrived, the girl gave the victim all the necessary resuscitation measures. She felt Oliver's pulse on the shore, and making sure that he was alive, tried to pump out most of the water from his lungs. Although the man coughed up enough water, he never regained consciousness, so Caroline had to carry him on her back to the nearest motorway. Caroline's own lungs burned like they were on fire. Her legs were shaking. She was sweating and coughing. But she was determined to save Oliver. When the ambulance finally arrived, Caroline described the situation to them, and they realized that there was something wrong and called the police. Caroline and Oliver were taken to the hospital, where they received all the necessary care. As the girl was hardly hurt, she was able to visit Oliver after a few long hours, which seemed like an eternity. The man, who by then had come to his senses, thanked her profusely. "You said you couldn't handle it," he said in a hoarse voice. "You not only managed, but thanks to you I'm still alive. And I can imagine what you had to go through while you dragged me through those woods. I'm sorry, Caroline. I'm ashamed of the way I pointed out your place," Oliver said. "Come on, Oliver," Caroline said. "The most important thing is that you're breathing. My teachers at school told me I had a talent for running. I'm finally getting the hang of it. If I hadn't run so much, I wouldn't have been able to get you out." Except what?" Oliver asked her grimly. "Your colleagues Kevin, Nick, Matthew. They're all dead," Caroline said with a heavy heart. Oliver nodded understandingly. "I don't understand what happened at all. The cars were in perfect working order, I'm sure of it." Caroline, Oliver glared at his young savior. "Is something troubling you? Are you ill? Should I call a doctor?" "No," Oliver stopped her. "No, it's not that." The young man reached into his jacket, which was hanging on the chair, and pulled a thick notebook out of the pocket, followed by a pre-prepared pen, straight from the cover. He wrote something on the tiny piece of paper, and tearing it off, handed it to Caroline. "Now you are the only one I can trust." Caroline, not understanding anything, took the slip of paper from his hands. There were some numbers written on it, and the girl counted as many as 10 of them. "But what are these?" she asked. "It's a code. Don't worry, it's not for the safe," Oliver joked. "It's just from my work laptop. The computer is in my office, and I have an unusual favor to ask of you. Please, it will help me understand and solve a lot of things." Caroline nodded, and after listening to her superior's request, she drove back home. Meanwhile, an investigator came to Oliver's room. The policeman interviewed the victim and assured him that they would do everything possible to find the intruders as soon as possible. Intruders, Oliver couldn't believe his ears, so it wasn't an accident. "I'm afraid not," the policeman shook his head. "We have brought the cars to the surface, and judging by the preliminary examination, I have no consolation for you. Someone deliberately cut your brake hose, knowing that you would be traveling in very difficult road conditions," the policeman said. Oliver slowly leaned back on the pillow. Well, they got to me. 2, he breathed out heavily. Your father's competitors, the policeman said. I'm sorry, but I've heard about this case. As far as I understand it, they never found who was responsible for Marcus's death. Oliver nodded briefly. I think it's the same people, he said weakly, feeling the familiar fear that the young man had been so successful at drowning out with alcohol all these years. Meanwhile, Caroline arrived at Oliver's mansion and went up to his office as inconspicuously as possible. She realized that all the cameras in the house had probably caught her, but she hoped that in case the security service was displeased with her, the owner of the mansion would somehow protect her in front of them. The girl booted up the ultra-modern flat-screen computer, then entered all 10 digits written for her by Oliver into the password field. Within a second, a blue wheel was spinning on the screen, and then access to the landlord's desktop opened up. A folder labeled Cameras clicked open. Caroline selected the appropriate date and the Garage tab, then waited for the video she wanted to see to load. Literally seconds later, Caroline saw the garage room. And then, the girl did not believe her eyes at first. A red-haired beauty in expensive shoes and the head of security, the man who was supposed to protect Oliver, entered the garage. He quickly looked around and damaged both brake hoses in the very cars they were traveling in today. What followed was an equally disgusting scene. The red-haired beast, who Caroline realized was Molly, gave her partner a kiss, after which they both left the garage at a leisurely pace. Caroline copied the tape to a flash drive, shut down the computer, and only then called the police. When the investigator and the SWAT team arrived at the mansion, the head of security was already packing his bags, expecting to run away with his girlfriend abroad. But Molly, thinking that their cunning plan had come true and Oliver was dead, had no intention of sharing her loot with her lover. Molly was picked up at the airport as she tried to leave the country. The investigation later revealed that Molly was actually working for the same people who took out Marcus, Oliver's father. She didn't take out anyone specifically, but she was promised an extremely large percentage of Oliver's wealth if he died before reaching the site of his next negotiation. So here Molly had charmed the man closest to him and put the idea in his head that she and he could be perfectly happy if they eliminated their wealthy master. Now Molly and Oliver's head of security are facing a hefty prison sentence. In addition, Oliver's ex-fiancée has shamelessly ratted out her own masters to the investigation. After all, the deal with the police guaranteed her a reduced sentence, while her lover from security will receive the maximum. Thanks to Molly's confession, the ringleaders of the rival company that had ordered Oliver's father were quickly identified. As it turned out, they were longtime enemies of their family, the family of the oldest of the brothers, who'd always wanted to take over their grand business. Oliver, coming out of the hospital, realized a lot and completely rethought his life and attitude to people. The young man first of all forever stopped with parties. In addition, Oliver permanently canceled all the stupid rules and fired Amanda, who frightened everyone. After that, he hired a completely different, kind-hearted woman who could not only manage his household perfectly, but also interacted with all his employees and co-workers as if they were family. Caroline continued her work in the house, but now they were very close friends. Their shared story of saving Oliver's life brought them together, and that was just the beginning. 15 years later, there was nowhere to park in front of the school where Caroline had once attended. The car park was packed to the gills. So many people had dreamed of seeing each other. And they'd all been classmates once. Vanessa, now an elderly woman, and once slim, stood in the middle of the hall with her husband at her side. The seated middle-aged man clearly didn't understand why he had been brought here, but he couldn't resist the will of his wealthy wife. Vanessa began to look even more full and plump than before. But whereas before her fullness had been almost imperceptible and had given her some of the glamour of her lush forms, now everything pointed only to deterioration and health problems, which Vanessa either denied or did not think it necessary to address. The woman could barely squeeze into a thin, sparkling dress, expecting, as it seems, an unforgettable wow effect from her old-school friends. However, those who admired Vanessa, and those who just pretended to admire her so as not to be pestered, could not appreciate the outfit, for the many folds made Vanessa look suspiciously like a sausage. Then a huge black car, gleaming clean, drove up to the school building. All those who were in the auditorium, and were actively devouring the delicious food rushed to the window. They were curious as to who was in it. When the doors of the luxurious leather salon opened, a graceful, slender, taut leg appeared. It was wearing graphite gray boots made of the finest suede. Following this, a beautiful young woman stepped out of the car. Thin as a bamboo stalk, but not too thin either. Her body seemed to radiate health and youth, and the modest smile on her beautiful face involuntarily attracted all eyes, like a magnet. "What's going on? What are you all staring at?" Vanessa said impatiently, pushing through the crowd to the window. The woman gasped loudly, and then her face twisted with envy and anger. A few minutes later, Caroline entered the hall, beautiful and blooming like a beautiful flower. Her classmates stared dumbfounded at her gorgeous suit, a tea of English fabric, her flawless hair, and discreet but quality makeup. No one could have imagined that Caroline, whom they had all mocked so meanly in their youth, would not only not lose her natural beauty and charm, but on the contrary, become the most successful woman of them all. "Hello, Caroline, how are you?" Vanessa stepped forward. "I see you're doing pretty well for yourself. How much do you pay your beautician? Or are you still doing it the old-fashioned way with a cucumber?" Vanessa laughed, pleased with her joke. However, apart from her, no one else made a sound. "Hello, Vanessa." Caroline greeted her calmly. "I just came in for a few minutes. I wanted to see you all. Take another look at my past. One last time to make sure I hadn't lost anything." Caroline took a few more steps toward Vanessa and pointed to her neck. There, as before, hung her father's gift, a pendant in the shape of a star, which the girl had bought with her first salary. "You know, Vanessa, you haven't changed a bit," the woman told her, enjoying the way her former classmate was literally bursting with envy. "You're still just as stupid, and your jokes are stupid too." Caroline looked at Vanessa from head to toe, and with one last glance at the crowd of her former classmates who had fallen from anger, boredom, and time, she slowly made her way back to the exit, saying one last time, "You see, life always knows who has done how much good and evil. Someone chooses to follow his star or gets a chance to become one of its rays. And someone remains an empty, shiny bubble for the rest of his life, from which the whole shell, alas, crumbles with time. Happy life to you all, boys." Caroline walked down to the door of the school. Her classmates immediately rushed back to the window. Oliver got out of the car that was waiting for her outside. He was still as tall and stately as ever, only now he wore a pair of slim-fitting glasses on the bridge of his nose. He was followed first by a boy of about 12, and then a girl of about 7. The children hugged Caroline happily, and Oliver smiled as he rubbed the heads of his offspring. Caroline turned round, and Oliver gave her a long kiss, full of tenderness and love. Then, after the whole story of the cars crashing into the river, he suddenly realized how different this girl was from any woman he had ever met. Courageous, strong, unbending, like a stem of bamboo. She always knew exactly what she wanted and was determined to achieve it. And tender and shy at the same time, pure as a petal of the most beautiful rose. She gave him everything he was looking for in this world and more. When he proposed to her, she told him yes. It was the happiest day of his life. When 6 months after the wedding Caroline told him that they were expecting a child, Oliver finally felt that he was no longer alone in the world. Now they both had a chance to live the life they both deserved, and nothing in the world could stop them. As Caroline and Oliver's car drove away, they did not see how hysterical Vanessa was long afterwards. How she tore at her artificial hair and how she cursed everything in the world, not understanding why Caroline, the technician's daughter, had been able to get everything in this life that should have been hers. Instead, all she had was money, which never made Vanessa happy. Yes, an alcoholic husband who married her just to get a good position in her father's company. Time had not spared her looks. Life hadn't added to her wisdom. And all this Vanessa realized only now, when it was too late to change anything.